Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 478 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And sadly, tonight we have some very concerning news coming out of Ukraine.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as well as news from the Russian coup, which appears to still have a little bit of fire left in it. And we'll also be reporting on the major news that was listed in the headline tonight. Before we get into that news and start to talk about what is exactly developing at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant at this moment, I would like to let you all know that we are currently running a fundraiser. Every single Sunday on this channel runs a fundraiser. And tonight's fundraiser is for Razom For Ukraine, a Ukrainian-based nonprofit that has been helping out Ukrainians ever since the beginning of the war. We can actually pull up their website right here. And I want to make sure that you all know about this fundraiser because I'm seeing that we may have a lot of new people coming in tonight. And of course, I want y'all to know about this fundraiser. It goes to help out the people in Ukraine. It is actually a nonprofit based in Ukraine, and we were able to run it through YouTube Give. Most of their support that they receive goes into medical, around 58% of it, and then another 28.4% goes into vehicles, generators, and communication devices, and another 8% goes into the food. The rest of it is largely smaller fare, but still, it is an amazing nonprofit based right out of Ukraine, and all of the support raised in this fundraiser goes directly to the nonprofit in question. YouTube actually manages the account, and they do not take anything out for processing it. They cover all of the transaction fees, and so if you send in $20, $100, or even $10,000, that exact amount will be ending up going to Razom For Ukraine, so that way they can help save the lives of people inside of Ukraine. And of course, with the news that we're getting at the moment, and many of y'all may know, we're not really one to hype up news much, even when things are quite severe. We have heard something from the Ukrainian government that we have not heard before up till this point. And so we're going to be moving off the fundraiser. I hope y'all do support that, though, and help to save the lives of Ukrainians and help Razom For Ukraine be ready for whatever may be coming down the road here or down the pipe here within the next few days. According to sources from the Ukrainian intelligence sphere, or more so the Ukrainian intelligence forces itself, have reported that there is a plan to blow up the nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and that plan has been given the green light and is currently underway at this moment. That was reported several hours ago at this point, and it has become a major point of concern. Many people are quite afraid of what may happen, and it is a reasonable thing to be afraid about. The nuclear power plant is the largest in Europe with 6 active nuclear reactors, and from what the Ukrainian intelligence has reported, 4 of those reactors have been set with explosives, and those 4 may be the ones that will have an imminent nuclear meltdown. Of course, I have to say this at the moment. We have not heard of a nuclear meltdown at this moment live on air from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, but the Ukrainians are stating that there is a plan that is underway at this moment to be melting down these nuclear reactors. We will, of course, be seeing, as time goes on throughout the rest of the night, what is going to be happening at the ZMPP. This is, of course, incredibly serious, and we've never heard the Ukrainians say anything like this before. We have heard the Ukrainians say that the nuclear power plant was being mined and there were explosives being equipped onto it, and we've also heard other reports that it was being used as a supply base and also had armed forces mounted onto the rooftops of the reactor buildings like the one you're seeing here in this picture. But we have never heard the Ukrainians make the statement that the nuclear power plant was in the process of being melted down. That this is the first time we've ever heard this statement from the Ukrainian intelligence sphere, and it appears to be quite serious from what we can understand. Of course, really quickly, I would like to say a huge thanks to my co-host here, Enforcer Matt, who has been putting this out on Twitter and has also helped us to find some of the exact details and information about what was possibly going on around the nuclear power plant and what the possible consequences of a meltdown at the power plant may be.
Anytime.
And also, yes, thank you so much. And really quickly to mention a little bit of a backstory about the ZMPP and how it's been getting into the situation it is right now. Many of y'all may have heard, or may have heard in passing a while ago, that the Novokakhovka Dam farther south, that is the gateway pretty much, or largely the barrier for the Novokakhovka reservoir we see here on this map, was blown up, and as a result of that, almost all of the waters that were held within the Novokakhovka Dam are gone now. This reservoir that I'm highlighting here with my mouse that you see in blue is entirely gone. What exists in its way is nothing more than a small creek, maybe a few feet deep, that travels through the entirety of it and down to the destroyed dam all the way down here at Novokakhovka. This has left the nuclear power plant with very little water sources to draw from. In fact, it only has one water source, and that is the cooling ponds that we have seen out here to the west of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. According to power plant officials at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, at the time of the dam being ruptured, they said that the chances of them being able to use the cooling pond water was going to be slim to none, and the ability to draw more water from the now destroyed reservoir was most likely going to be non-existent. They did have safeguards in place to be able to draw more water from the reservoir if need be, even if the dam further downstream was destroyed. But it appears that whatever those safeguards were supposed to be doing, the power plant officials appear to have been showing a lot of wariness about the ability for those pumps to be able to draw more water into the cooling pond. And it also appears from that initial statement, once the reservoir had been destroyed around 20 days ago, the power plant officials we're making it fairly clear that for some reason the cooling pond water may not be usable either. We're not really sure if the power plant had been circulating the cooling pond water to an unusual amount at that point, to have heated it to the point it's no longer usable. We're not entirely sure. And so the power plant had already been in a very precarious circumstance at this point, and the International Agency the International Atomic the IAEA is what we'll call them, because for some reason I can't get the actual agency name out. The IAEA, up until the reservoir had been blown up, was saying that if that dam was blown up, it was going to cause catastrophic results at the ZMPP, and it most likely would not be able to operate. It may even melt down. Once the reservoir was blown up, the IAEA then came out and started to backtrack those statements and say that the situation was not going to be too severe. But in the background, we've still been hearing from the IAEA that the ZMPP only has several months until the situation becomes critical, although they have been trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation. Now, after all of that happened around 20 days ago and has been developing ever since, we are now hearing from the Ukrainian intelligence circles that the power plant has now been given the green light to go into meltdown by Russian forces. We are going to be waiting and seeing if that does occur. At the moment, we are kind of in a meltdown alert. It is not currently in a meltdown from what we understand, but the Ukrainian intelligence is saying that the nuclear plant will melt down. And I also have to say this as well. I feel like a little bit of a disclaimer is needed here, is that we are getting this information from the Ukrainian intelligence sphere and the Ukrainian government. So far, they have never given us a reason to doubt anything they say. They were correct on the statement that the Novikakhovka Dam had been mined. They have been correct about many statements up until this point. And the Ukrainian intelligence has also said in the past that most of the reactors of the ZMPP, somewhere around 4 out of 6 of them, have been mined with explosives and are prepared to explode. We've also heard that from them as well. So at this moment,
and also, I just want to say that, but Ukraine has said before that the power plant was at risk of being, I guess, a target of terrorist operations by Russia. But this time, the big distinction is Ukraine's now saying that Russia has approved the plans and they may be underway at this time. So that's a huge difference from the previous accusations that Ukraine has thrown at Russia.
And Matthew's exactly correct with that. That is what's causing this to be far more serious and is also causing us to cover this practically immediately. We usually on this channel avoid covering the nuclear power plant news because most of the time it's hype talk and puffery, and a lot of people are trying to make something out of something that isn't really there. This time, however, the Ukrainian intelligence has come out and clearly stated that they say, and from the information they have received, that there is a meltdown that is planned and has been given the green light at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We are not exactly sure how that is going to go down. We're not exactly sure when that is going to happen at this moment. Some people have been saying that it most likely will happen today, if it happens at all, and so we are going to be watching live on air while we cover the rest of the news if things start to seriously degrade here at the ZMPP. Moving on into other additional news, the results of the ZMPP melting down would be quite severe. We actually have a fallout map from Ukraine World here showing what the most likely paths of fallout would be if the reactor was to melt down. And we can see that based off of the Gulf streams here, this was also measured, it appears, in 2022, somewhere around September 17th. And this would have been what the radiation map looked like at that point. The radiation fallout would actually be quite severe, and considering that the ZMPP is in an active war zone, much like the Novikakhovka Dam, the chances of the power plant possibly being repaired or a liquidation effort going underway is slim to none in reality. It is, of course,
something I didn't see on that chart on the video you just showed on Twitter was it really didn't show it going into Russia, but I have heard experts say before that it could affect the interior of Russia. I might have not seen that, maybe.
I don't think we did. We'll watch that one more time. We can see that it sweeps out over Dnipro, and then it gets swept on into Poland, and we can see that it's generally, according to this map here, the radioactive fallout is generally taking the same path it took from Chernobyl when it melted down just north of Kyiv. In this area, it appears to be heading up into the Scandinavian countries and would most likely sweep down into the United Kingdom, and by that point, it mostly would have dissipated.
Interesting. And also, what was the source of this like model right here?
The source of this model, according to Ukraine World, is the Ukraine Hydrometeorological Institute. And so I guess it is the Ukrainian Institute responsible for collecting and creating these maps to show what kind of disaster would be happening. And y'all can see that the fallout there would be quite severe and would start to affect a large amount of NATO countries. It would affect the entirety of the Baltics, it would affect most of the Eastern NATO alliance, and would also affect the Scandinavian countries like Norway and Sweden, which will possibly be part of an alliance soon if a radioactive incident was to occur. Not only that, the radioactive fallout would start to affect many areas quite severely. We believe that the radioactive exclusion zone around the ZMPP, if it is to melt down, will probably be far larger than that of the Chernobyl radioactive zone, because the Chernobyl radioactive zone was from a single nuclear reactor that ended up going into a meltdown. From what we assume in the Zaporizhzhia power plant, the Russians are planning on putting 4 nuclear reactors into a complete meltdown. That would be far more severe, the radioactive contamination would be a lot more intense, and we would assume that the radioactive fallout zone would most likely include everything from the area of Belozerka and all the way up to the area of Tokmakivka. Zaporizhzhia may also have to be abandoned as well due to radioactive fallout concerns. Not only that, we have also been told by Ukrainian sources that the radioactive fallout, while the Novikakhovka reservoir does not exist, it will certainly start to greatly affect all of the downwash water heading out of the Dnipro River and on into the Black Sea. And if the radiation was not contained almost immediately, it could actually irradiate almost the entirety of the Black Sea and devastate fish populations throughout the entirety of it, practically meaning that food sources from the Black Sea would be non-existent, and further contamination of the Eastern Mediterranean may be possible as well. The situation is, of course, quite severe, and the fact that the Ukrainian intelligence, and once again to go and reread exactly what the Ukrainian intelligence is claiming at this point, according to the Kyiv Post, Russia has completed preparations for the bombing of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. The plan has already been drawn up and approved, Ukraine's intelligence reported. And that is, of course, incredibly severe. This is the most severe wordage we've ever seen of something like this. We don't know what has really led to this plan being approved at this moment either. We have heard that there are rumors going around as to why this plan has been approved. Some are saying that it's being approved because of the Russian coup and Putin is trying to distract from the internal problems inside of Russia. That may actually be the case. We've also heard rumors that this power plant is now going into a meltdown because Ukrainian forces appear to be breaking through the Russian lines, and the Russian forces may be on the verge of collapse along the front lines. That may also be true as well. We're still not exactly...
Also, I heard another rumor that we just hit goal on our fundraiser, by the way.
What? Already?
Yes, thanks to a $3,500 donation by Mark, and I hate to sound excited about it because we have such bad news coming out of Ukraine right now with this power plant, but
Go ahead. I was just trying to get over to it.
Yeah, but at the same time, huge thanks to Mark and everyone else for helping us reach that goal at $5.1 thousand this early in the stream.
And I got to say, thank you to everyone who's helped out the fundraiser so far. I would be incredibly excited about that tonight and over the top. And I got to thank everyone, including Mark, who supported this fundraiser so far and is helping to save the lives of people in Ukraine. But of course, it is very hard to try and balance the excitement of us reaching another fundraiser goal 27 minutes into stream, and also the fact that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is possibly going into a nuclear meltdown at this moment. And so really quickly to belay fears, because I don't want everyone to be thinking that the world is going to be ending here in a moment, the meltdown has not happened yet. And from what we hear, the plan has been approved, and they're saying the Ukrainian intelligence is saying it's going to happen today, which over there in Ukraine, that means that they have about another 16 more hours to conduct this meltdown on the power plant, according to the one-day cycle it's supposed to be in. But it hasn't happened at this moment, and we'll be waiting to see if it is happening, but we are going to be watching live on air in the background. Of course, we'll be getting to the rest of the news here in a minute, but we'll be watching in the background to make sure that there is nothing serious that is happening at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and if something begins to happen and we start to hear news of a meltdown happening at the power plant, we will stop everything in our tracks on stream, and we'll begin to cover that right here and right now. We may even throw up an emergency stream later on in the next day if a nuclear meltdown becomes imminent. Tomorrow is our off day on stream. We usually do not stream on Mondays, but if something does happen, we will be streaming that day. We will even stream in the middle of the day if we need to. But of course, the situation is getting a lot more serious, and Ukrainian intelligence has had reports to believe that the nuclear power plant may be melting down here within the next day, according to a Russian plan. Speaking of Russian plans, the coup led by Yevgeny Prigozhin, leader of the Wagner Group, appears to have not subsided at this moment. Video footage came out today from somewhere around the Rostov-on-Don area of Akhmat forces running against Wagner units that are still near the area of Rostov-on-Don, and these forces were disarmed by the Wagner. And so here's the clip. When you see the Wagner disarming the Akhmat, which is pretty bizarre. We didn't see any of this the other day when the Wagner was withdrawing from Rostov-on-Don, but it now appears that the coup is still going to a small degree. We've also heard reports, and we haven't been able to confirm these, that Wagner forces that seized Russian airports in the south of Russia are refusing to give up the airports back to the Russian Ministry of Defense. We are still trying to get more information on that story at the moment, but this is pretty wild to see. We actually haven't seen that clip before, and pretty interesting to see that they are or were disarming Akhmat forces earlier on several hours ago. Moving on up into the area of Voronezh as well, we also saw another clip from the coup that we had not seen before. We saw, and of course I do have to say that this happened during the coup itself. This was on the 24th of June, which would have been yesterday. And we've never seen this before, ever, on this channel. This is the first time we've seen it, and this is starting to add a little bit more to the credibility of this was not a smoke and mirror show for everyone around the world to make the Russians look weak. What we're about to see is the Russians conduct an airstrike on the side of this highway in Voronezh onto a Wagner column. We've not seen this clip before on stream, and it adds a lot more tension to what happened a little while ago, and so here's the clip. Also, we'll be playing the clip with the music in it. I know that usually we're concerned with copyright, but we're not going to be that concerned with copyright on this clip because it's probably not even copyright-protected music. You see the car driving, and there's the airstrike. Oh. And the debris crushed the windshield. And then the car
and that guy just soiled his pants.
Yeah, that guy just crapped himself. And we didn't see that clip when the coup was happening. We were covering every single clip when we were getting them, and that was pretty wild to see. We hadn't seen anything like that. But moving on from that, we're going to be moving on out of yesterday's news that we are just starting to see some clips of that we didn't see the other day, and we're going to be moving on into clips from today. Most particularly of an Antonov 22 that we reported during the coup. Many of y'all may remember the story of the Wagner coup, considering that happened, well, actually, it just ended yesterday, and now we're already talking about a nuclear power plant possibly melting down. Time moves pretty quickly nowadays in the Ukraine war world, but an Antonov 22 had taken off and was observing Wagner forces from the air. To show you what an Antonov 22 looks like, this is what the aircraft looks like right here. And let me make sure I'm getting the correct one. And let me make sure, because I believe it may have been possibly, it is an IL-22, correction. Let me go grab an IL-22 instead. Okay, there is no such thing as an IL-22. I don't know why they called it an IL-22M. Let me go get the other clip, because I'm pretty sure it was an Antonov 22. I just want to make sure. So they're actually calling this an IL-22 on everything. So let me go and pull up the IL-22M. And so here we go. Here is the IL-22M. This was the aircraft that was shot down the other day near the city of Lipetsk. At the time this aircraft was shot down, not a lot of information had come out about this aircraft. We didn't know exactly how many souls were on board. We know that there would have been at least 5 crew members on board at minimum. We have now been told that there was a crew of 10 on board. This aircraft appeared to have been a part of the airborne command and communication aircraft of the Russian Air Force. We are assuming that this aircraft was being used at the time to observe the Wagner column as they continued to make their way up the M4 into Moscow. Of course, many of y'all, and to refresh everyone's memory here, may remember this clip the other day after the the Ilyushin 22M had been stricken by a Pantsir S-1 surface-to-air missile and was then spiraling to the ground. We'll play that clip again. We can see the IL-22M in a spiral right here. And falling to the ground. The aircraft.
I wonder if the people filming knew that this was a Russian plane shot down by Wagner.
Possibly. I think they may have known a little bit about it, but you got to remember, Matthew, everything was happening even for us over here so quickly. It was really hard to keep track of what was happening at all. So these people may have had no idea what was happening around them. They just saw that an aircraft was spiraling out of the sky, and they may have thought it was just going to be another episode of air disasters. We can also see the IL-22, when it was shot down yesterday, breaking up in flight. And someone just asked in the live chat, no parachutes? No parachutes. There was no way for the crew to bail out from this aircraft. All 10 crew members went down with the plane. And we can also see by how quickly it's rolling in this flat spin here, there was really no way for the crew to even walk through the aircraft to get their way to a door to jump out. And then behind this tree here, the IL-22M then crashed in a field, about 2 miles away. And we see some of the remaining parts of the IL-22 floating on their way down to the ground. So for the first time today, we actually got some pictures and footage showing the crash site of the IL-22. We can see the debris, the insulation inside of the fuselage, is strewn all about after the aircraft hit the ground, and of course it became a burning pile once it hit, and so a large part of the aircraft practically doesn't exist at this point. We can also see the tail section a little bit further over there. We assume that that may have been the part of the aircraft that ripped off right there, and we saw on film kind of floating around the air. It may have also been a wingtip as well. We couldn't really tell that too clearly, but we can see the remains of the aircraft in this clip. And once again, just to add a little bit more validity to this whole story of the coup, because there's still a lot of people out there, I don't know why, that are still trying to question whether the coup was real or not. This was an IL-22M, and the IL-22Ms, if we pull up their cost, and let me go try and find the cost of one of these aircraft here. Let's see. Apparently it's called a Kutby. I didn't know that. That's news. Unfortunately, I cannot find a cost for an IL-22M aircraft, but considering that this was a largely specialized aircraft, the shooting down of an aircraft like this by the Wagner PMC is taking away something from the Russian Air Force that they most likely will never be able to get back in any way whatsoever. We can also see the tail section right here on the back. We can see its number, and we may actually be able to find this aircraft before it was shot down because of its number on the tail. So let's see if we can find it. That is that's 75920, and this aircraft is 75917. So we may be able to find this aircraft here. Let's see, that's 94417. Let's see here. Come on. We need more clarity. Apparently, that picture doesn't have any graphics on it. So we're going to move on from that one.
If in doubt, Bliat, look for the ugliest airplane in existence, Bliat.
If in doubt, Bliat, make it look like 6-year-old threw this thing up and then we just built one, Bliat. But anyways, sadly we cannot find the tail number of this aircraft before it had crashed, but this is the exact model of aircraft that we would have seen. It was an IL-22M, now shot down, 10 valuable crew members lost, 10 Russian aviators who will never fly a plane or operate on a plane again. That is quite a massive loss. That is an incredibly significant loss for the Russian Air Force. At this moment, we understand that the Russian Air Force is actually having a great deal of difficulty training any new pilots because it's an incredibly expensive and incredibly lengthy process. And considering that an entire air crew of an Ilyushin 22, all 5 of them, and an additional 5 crew members were killed on board, shows that this coup has already had a serious impact on Russia's surveillance abilities, for example, with this IL-22. And once again, adding more validity to the fact that this was a real coup. This was no smoke and mirror show. People actually ended up dying in this coup. And here's one more picture of the stricken IL-22 on its way down. In this picture here, we can see that the tail section appears to be separated at this point. One of the wingtips has also been sheared off, most likely from the airspeed or just the force of it in a flat spin. And we can also see that it appears that the aircraft may have been hit over here on the what would be the aircraft's right side, as the fire coming out of the top of the wing was coming from the right side of the fuselage and the right wing. And so we could see, for the first time, real proof of the IL-22 having been shot down and crashed. Here's the same footage on Reddit over again that we just clipped from there as well. And so if you want to go look at it, we have 2 separate clips that'll show everything that was compiled by OSINT Defender on the IL-22, a great Twitter page, and also the one clip we got from Twitter, which appears to be the wreckage site again. But moving on from that, I would also like to add to everyone, to add a little bit to the story, that nobody has heard or seen of Prigozhin since he left Rostov-on-Don. We do not know where he is at the moment. He has never arrived in Belarus, and it appears that that Prigozhin may have disappeared. We're also hearing that the Wagner isn't exactly giving up as easily as anticipated either. We are hearing reports and rumors from inside of Russia that the Wagner is still seizing and controlling airports at this moment, mostly in the Rostov-on-Don area and the Rostov Oblast, maybe even in Voronezh as well, although those are far less confirmed than the ones in Rostov. We don't know what's happening right now in Russia, but it appears that revolt and rebellion may possibly still be on the horizon, and it appears that the Russians are in a little bit of a bind or a difficult situation as far as that goes. Moving on into Moscow, we also heard on public state television today that calls were being made by Duma officials, which is the version of a congressman here in the United States, for Prigozhin to be killed on the spot.
Дело в том, что сегодня...
And so to read the translation of this guy, and I'll also give you all the little bit of exposition, this was on Vladimir Solovyev's show. This is a Russian member of parliament, Andrei Gorlyov, and he says that Prigozhin should be shot. And so now I'm going to read y'all his exact words as he speaks them here in this video. The thing is that today, whatever anybody might say, whatever fibs they might tell, a bullet in the forehead is the only salvation for both Prigozhin and Utkin. What's more, they know me. They know that I take responsibility for everything I say. There's no other option. And that's pretty serious right there. This guy is just straight up calling for them to be shot and killed. And right now, at the moment, we don't know where in the hell Prigozhin is gone either. So it may be the case that they're already getting ready to ice the guy, and he's not even, the coup was just over 24 hours ago, and now they're already talking about assassinating him. So we'll be waiting and seeing what's going on there. I just want you to know that while we did report yesterday that the coup had officially ended, or the rebellion, the armed rebellion had officially ended, from what we can tell now, the armed rebellion may still be going on in smaller form, even without Prigozhin, and we've even seen that some units on the front lines, like the Storm unit, are now a little confused that Prigozhin gave up. The Storm unit actually changed sides from being a part of the Russian Ministry of Defense and had sided with Prigozhin and the Wagner during the ongoing armed rebellion the other day. And we can now see that these former convicts in the Storm unit are apparently pretty confused as to why Prigozhin gave up so quickly. And so here's the video of this as well. Hi, Viktorovich. What do they say? Listen, you're lost. Fufo. You drove all the guys away. The whole Storm Z was ready to go to the mountains for you. And not only Storm Z, but your guys too. And you're lost somewhere. We have commanders here already. They are... When people move with each other, they move in a straight line. And you're a nobody. Oh, I can't read that one. You can't be called anything else. If that's not the case, then show yourself, you manly man. We're sure in you. Zinya, you put us in your guys. You talked nicely. We gave you support. And now what? We are already promised a good life. I think the same way as your guys. Believe me, good people will not leave it like that. And that's
a ragtag group of guys right there. Is that Wagner?
No, that's the Storm Z, another group of convicts that the Russians released to fight in this war. So those are those fine, upstanding gentlemen who sided with the Wagner are more prison convicts. But as you can see right there, this thing has sown the seeds, of course, for further dissent and further rebellion. And we can see a lot of people were gung-ho and on board to join Prigozhin in this little gallivant through the countryside to Moscow. And it appears that a lot of them are completely confused as to why he stopped, and we're still confused as to why Prigozhin stopped the coup. We're not really sure why, and we don't even know where he is at the moment. He has disappeared. So regardless of these guys' request for him to show up since he's a quote-unquote manly man, I don't really think he will show up because right now we don't even know where the guy is. But we're now going to be moving on to the northern border of Belarus, speaking of the Wagner, because many people have been talking about a possible smoke and mirror show, and I would have to say, in all of the information that we've gotten and all of the evidence we've gotten, it seems more so that the coup is a matter of fact, more so than a matter of fiction. It was a real event that occurred, multiple people died in this coup attempt, and it was quite serious. But there are still people who have been saying quite often on the internet and throughout the world that this was nothing more than an attempt to move Prigozhin and Wagner to Belarus under the guise of some kind of a coup d'etat where they've been exiled to the country. The Ukrainians, while seeming to not really take this too seriously, have taken some necessary precautions to ensure if such a thing happens, they would be prepared. And we did hear a statement from a Ukrainian general today. That general is Lieutenant General Sergei Naev. He said that the possible attack from the Wagnerians on Kyiv from Belarus would be suicide. He said our troops are nonstop building up defense equipment, and the state border is under reliable protection 24/7. And so, if you think the coup was real, there's nothing to worry about. If you thought the coup was fake, and you think that the Wagner is moving to Belarus with Prigozhin, and they're going to be ready to attack Kyiv from up there, the Ukrainians have made it clear that will not succeed whatsoever, and they are prepared for anything to happen. The Ukrainians have been preparing at this point for the entirety of the war since the Russians left that area on April 1st of 2022. If the Russians or Belarusians were to try and invade from the northern border, they have been ready this entire time, and they will be ready if anything is to happen. They will stop the Wagner, if the Wagner even is there. At the moment, from what we understand, the parts of the Wagner that have given up, they are currently being, the units are being disbanded, and those soldiers are now being taken and spread out throughout the entirety of the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian army, so that way they end up not grouping together again and attempting another coup. Moving on out of that news in the northern border and getting on into some more positive news, and also I'll be checking sporadically over here on our second screen to make sure that there's no nuclear news going on. And just in case if you are just joining us right now, we have already covered the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant meltdown alert news earlier in stream. At this moment, we are just kind of on a meltdown alert or a meltdown watch. We are waiting to see if anything is going to happen at the power plant. Ukrainian intelligence has indicated that something may happen, and so we are just trying to make sure that nothing happens. And also letting all of y'all know about the serious concerns from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and the Ukrainian intelligence circles about what may be possibly happening there. We're now going to be moving on into the Russian border. The Russians, of course, have been heavily concerned about border security. It appears that they need to be more concerned about the people within Russia than the people outside of Russia. Nonetheless, the Ukrainians have been trying to deter Russian border fortifying attempts and was able to destroy a special equipment vehicle, a Caterpillar crane, in the area of the Kursk border. We can see the FPV drone flying in, getting ready to strike the special equipment vehicle. And we can now see Caterpillar power. And here comes the drone. And poof, and there goes the excavator. It appears that the tank ditch won't be dug today. It will have to be postponed until another day. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news near the border. We can see that the Ukrainians are conducting harassing actions against the Russians in that area. And we're now going to be moving on down into the area of Kherson. Y'all aren't going to believe this. And also, before I get into this news here, because I have to build up for this one because y'all are going to be blown away by this. Of course, y'all heard, and this is the bit of news about it. It's this little marker in silver on this map, which you can get in the link in the description below. The Ukrainians announced an offensive on all fronts once the Wagner coup began a few days ago. And that offensive appears to have been making minor gains in every direction ever since it has began. We heard something a little new today, that the Ukrainians have actually crossed the Dnipro River and have created such a strong foothold in that area. The Russians are actually having to retreat and cover their forces as they retreat away from the Dnipro River. We're going to be covering that here in a second. It's wild news. It's insane news. But before we get to that, I, of course, have to talk about one of the biggest things of tonight's stream, which is our fundraiser for Razom. And I'd also like to plug that again to everyone because a lot of people have joined us. There's nearly 12,000 people here right now. I would like y'all to all know that we are currently running a fundraiser attached to this stream to help out the people who are inside of Ukraine right now who may be wounded or may be injured or may be in need of support, such as food or maybe even electricity, which is also something that sometimes is no longer available in Ukraine. That fundraiser is Razom for Ukraine. You can see it right below this video. It's in a little window. It says donate now. And if you like to, you can support that fundraiser. And that support will go directly to Razom for Ukraine and help to save the lives of people over in Ukraine. And also, if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant actually does melt down, that support right there may actually be used to help out the people who may be afflicted from the radioactive fallout zone or radiation altogether. But with that, I want to make sure that we address some of our leading questions of the night, because many of y'all have, of course, seen a lot of our leading questions there in the live chat as we've been trying to gauge what y'all have been thinking about some of the top situations of the day. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and just real quick, I want to recap where we're at on the fundraiser. We're currently at $5.7 thousand, and our goal tonight was $5,000, so we're 700 roughly above goal, so tremendous work. We reached it very fast, and if you're new to the LSA, which I'm sure a lot of you are, we run these fundraisers every single Sunday, and we have yet to not reach a goal. So every single Sunday, we're reaching the goals. It's usually 5,000 or so, sometimes it's 10, and we're currently somewhere around $1 million plus raised for Ukrainian charities. So extremely good work, I gotta say. And thank you all once again for the generosity to the fundraiser. And real quick, I just want to call off our top donors up to this point right now. And up first, we have that very generous $3,500 donation from Mark, Incompetent Drone Operator, the largest one of the night. And thank you again, Mark, very much for that generosity. Then we have a $350 from DCC Prime 1. We have a $200 from Trister 1, as well as a $150 from Repo Man 46. And then we have several $100 donations. The first is from Hal Rose. Then we have one from Greg Carrier, some guy called the Enforcer that happens to run the channel as well. Then we have one from Roman, Enforcer for President, Donna Olson. Then we have a $50 from What's on Tap, Nebraska, a $50 from Mom, Cat, and Max, Stefan, Firefly 1873, Tom Lange, and Dad Good. And thank you all once again, even if we weren't able to call your name off, because all those donations add up to reach that 5.7 thousand. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say thank you to everyone who we've been able to call out and not call out tonight for helping this fundraiser to get to where it is at this point. Right now, we are sitting at $5.8 thousand raised. And of course, that is absolutely incredible, and it's going to be saving lots of lives. And I actually saw some people in the live chat, it appears that they may be new to our stream, asking, how in the world does the accounting work for these fundraisers? And I would have to say, that's a pretty valid question. YouTube, of course, is a pretty varied place with millions of active YouTube channels on it, and some people run fundraisers that aren't exactly fundraisers. It's more so let me have a free vacation kind of deal. And so let me explain to y'all how our fundraiser works by dragging over our live stream right here. I actually have this open on my second screen so that way I can see the fundraiser window. If you're watching this on desktop like I am, this is the format that I'm working with because this is a desktop, you can scroll down below the live chat and you'll see right here the exact amount that has been raised for the fundraiser. That actually updates live whenever anyone sends anything in. And you can also see what I have to say about Razom for Ukraine, and you can also see what Razom Ukraine says for itself. It is an amazing nonprofit. It's absolutely incredible, and this is also run through YouTube. And you can see right here that YouTube gives the guarantee that it is verified. It gave it a little check mark, much like our channel has, and it also says that YouTube covers all transaction fees, and it goes to a nonprofit website, which is Razom for Ukraine. The YouTube actually is the one who runs the account. We opened the account for this fundraiser by creating a fundraiser in YouTube Give, but YouTube does all of the managing. So if y'all send in $100, or let's just say right now there is exactly $5,927 that is in this fundraiser right now. That means that YouTube covers all of the transaction fees, so nothing is deducted if you're paying over a credit card or anything like that. And also, they do not charge anything for the accounting as well. So while there are people who have to compile the amount and actually get all of the individual donations and then send that to the nonprofit, they don't actually take out any of this. So exactly $5,932 will go directly to Razom for Ukraine. And it being run through YouTube, it gives it a great guarantee and the largest security possible that there can be no tampering from any outside party, including us ourselves. And so that's how the fundraiser ends up running every single time. We don't run them out of YouTube Give. We never run them out of YouTube Give, because I think YouTube Give is the most trustworthy way to run nonprofits and fundraisers. Just in case you're new tonight and you're wondering how they work, that's how our fundraisers work. And so you can be assured that if you support this fundraiser, it will go exactly to the nonprofit in question. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I'm now going to drag that back off screen. And with that, it's time for us to get into those leading questions.
And also, folks, I apologize ahead of time. I'm going to have to turn on subscriber-only mode because the bots are flooding in so heavy tonight, I really can't keep up with them. So it's not a ploy to get you to subscribe, although we would really appreciate it. We have to do that for spam protection. But anyways, moving on to our first poll, it says, Ukrainian intel says Russia has approved plans to destroy the Ukrainian nuclear plant, and is this Putin's next move? It looks like 51% said yes, it's Putin's new distraction. It looks like 23% said it's too early to tell, 15% said unsure, and 12% said no, Russia would not attempt that. And I think at this point, with Russia being so unstable in their government because of Prigozhin's coup, I think Putin is looking for a new distraction to try to divert everyone's attention away from what seems to be a faltering government in Russia. I'm not sure if the power plant is going to be the distraction. There could be other things, for example, trying to take Prigozhin hostage and have him make a forced statement. There's plenty of other options. But of course, this nuclear power plant has been a looming threat for months now, and it looks like, according to the Ukrainians, something bad is going on in the background. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say we have never had a reason to doubt Ukrainian intelligence up until this point. If for some reason the nuclear meltdown doesn't happen for the next few days, while they're saying it's going to be happening within this day in Ukraine, which will be about the next 18 to 16 hours, I'm going to give it a window of about 3 days. We're going to be watching this news quite tentatively for the next 3 days. If it doesn't happen in those 3 days, I'm going to end up starting to be a little skeptical about Ukrainian intelligence reports. But at the moment, up till this point, Ukrainian intelligence has given us absolutely nothing to doubt about their reports or their information. So it may be the case that this power plant is in the process of a meltdown right now, or the Russians are setting it up for a meltdown. I think this most likely is some kind of an attempt by the Russian government to try and draw attention away from the domestic situation inside of Russia and start to focus it outwards. Sadly, there is no other submersible to implode on the surface of the ocean floor for there to be any attention taken away from, so it appears that they're going for the next best thing, and they're going to be going for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant instead and trying to melt it down. I think that is absolutely sick and barbaric if that's actually what they're doing right now, but that is what we're kind of dealing with, at least according to Ukrainian intelligence at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well in my opinion. It's very interesting to hear a lot of y'all agree with that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, UK intel claims Prigozhin ended his coup because members of his family were threatened, along with other Wagner leadership. And what are your thoughts? 55% said it sounds likely and makes sense. It looks like 17% said it sounds unlikely, it doesn't make any sense. 16% said unsure, and 13% said, how do they know for certain? And this was one of our points of speculation the other day that maybe Prigozhin's family was threatened. Of course, that would be a huge motivator for him to stop something like his coup that he was trying to perform there. And it seems like, according to the UK, that might have been what took place. It sounds plausible to me, but we'll never know for certain until we get more evidence to back that up. But Enforcer, what say you?
That seems to be the best story that we can go with at the moment. Nobody really has a good explanation as to why Prigozhin backed out. It just doesn't make any sense. We saw the defenses around Moscow. We knew they were going to be easy to go through. We knew the Wagner could deal with them. They were bringing forward main battle tanks, and the best the Russians had were some BTR-80s inside of Moscow. So we know for certain that the Wagner could have taken them on and won, and it even made it all the way to the Kremlin if they wanted to, for the most part. We don't really know why, and we know that something had to have happened behind the scenes that was drastic, something to make him completely stomp on the brakes, but we don't know what it would have been. And so I would say that's about our best guess at the moment, but I think there could probably be better explanations out there. We just haven't heard them at the moment. And so I hope that addresses that fairly well, in my opinion, and fairly interested to hear a lot of y'all think that that may be the plausible option. It may be the plausible option. That may be something that was serious enough to make him stop, considering that he had the upper hand at that moment, but we'll just have to wait and see as time passes by and more information comes out if that really was the case or not. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, according to reports, all flights out of Moscow have sold out. And what do you make of this? 64% said the Russian public is now panicking. 25% said only the rich and powerful are leaving. 8% said unsure, and 3% said, it's probably just a coincidence. And when I heard this, to me, that was a huge sign that the Russian public in general is starting to have a panic. And that's something generally throughout this entire Ukrainian war that they've been somewhat immune from. Some Russians like to turn a blind eye to the atrocities because it's either too much for them to handle or they simply don't care, or some of them actually support Putin in the old Soviet ways, which Putin is trying to replicate. So now it looks like the Russian public is starting to realize that it's going to affect them there in their own country, and some of them are deciding it's best to get out now before it gets worse. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I think they may actually be leaving at this moment because of how serious the situation has become. Of course, a coup was just attempted, and I would have to be honest with you, Matthew. I think that they're probably leaving because they're scared that the coup may go on, or there may be more coup attempts around the country, because now everyone has seen that the Russian government is nothing more than a pinata. While I try and get that, a pinata to be busted open by anyone who can make their way to Moscow. So really, it's on the table for everyone. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what we can tell at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our last poll for now says the Kremlin claims a deal was reached with Wagner, but yet they have not fully withdrawn. And is the coup really over? It looks like 43% said no, Wagner isn't done yet. 27% said, maybe not, who knows? 17% said unsure, and 13% said yes, it's over, Wagner is dead. And to me, I don't think the coup is over, but I don't think Wagner is going to be the one to continue it on. Because right now, their leader Prigozhin has either been taken into Russian custody, he's dead, or he's missing. It's one of those three options. And without the leader, I don't think they're going to have cohesion. And I think we're going to see a new rebranded version of Wagner pop up that might carry on the coup. But at this point, it's unclear if that's going to take place. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think that may be likely, exactly how you explained it. I think there will still be sporadic resistance, however, because we are hearing those sparse reports that there are holdouts of Wagner troops that are not giving up inside of Russia right now, holding air bases and such things. So that may actually end up being the case, but I don't think we'll be seeing this coup from Wagner the way it was just a day or two ago, because that was with a unified leader, and these kinds of coups have to have someone strong at the head of them that will lead everyone forward. And now with Prigozhin out of the way and completely disappeared off the face of the earth, we don't know where he is, I believe we probably will not see this coup go any farther. It'll be sparse resistance at this point, stuff that the Russians can actually handle, and then beyond that, it will largely subside. Someone else may step up and take the mantle, though, of causing dissent and possibly conflict inside of Russia, but it probably will not be the Wagner. And so with that, I hope that does address that, in my opinion, fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we're all out of polls. So, of course, we're going to address 3 live chat questions. And tonight, there are no super chats because it's a fundraiser night. So, if you have a question for us, put @EnforcerMatt in the chat and your question behind it, and I'll add it to our list. But up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream: Mark Hodges, C-Fay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Banu, and Paul Schultz. They said the West is ready if anything happens to the power plant. Glory to Ukraine. Long live the LSA. And that is what the Morse code says.
That is the correct message. Y'all got that right. And hopefully, the West will be prepared for anything that happens with the nuclear power plant. We've already heard Western officials claim that they will be treating it as an invocation of Article 5 through the means of Article 4 laid out in Article 6. That's a little confusing, but you have to activate Article 4 to move to Article 5, and then Article 6 lays out what will activate Article 4. So it's kind of like a whole roundabout circle of articles that lead to the activation of Article 5. But I hope that they have a actual plan if anything goes wrong at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because from what we hear, the situation is, of course, getting more and more serious as time goes by, and we are seeing right now that nobody is really doing anything in response to this supposed news from the Ukrainian intelligence that the reactor may melt down. Hopefully they do have a plan in place, though, if it does melt down. Honestly, in my opinion, I think hearing this news from Ukrainian intelligence, we should consider a preemptive plan to try and stop the meltdown from even occurring, considering that the results of the meltdown will be catastrophic not only for Ukraine, it'll be catastrophic for NATO countries bordering the Black Sea, which includes Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. It may even be catastrophic for Eastern Mediterranean countries such as Greece and the rest of the coastal states on the Balkans, maybe even Italy as well. And the fallout could also start to affect countries like Poland, Denmark, and Norway as well, which are all a part of the NATO alliance. That could end up being quite concerning, so hopefully they have some kind of a plan. And so with that,
and I have a feeling that the plan is probably already being developed today, since it is Sunday night. Probably tomorrow morning on Monday, when the news cycle starts all over once again and gets rolling, we'll probably see some U.S. officials come out and say that they have been watching the situation and that they have some plan in action. But since it is Sunday night, it seems like they're probably still in the planning phase.
Hopefully that's the case, because I would hate to hear that this happens and then we start scrambling to make a plan. We need to have a plan right now. And so with that, hope that does address that Morse code message fairly well, and thank y'all so much for doing that. Y'all amazed the entire Lee Spring Army and everyone watching here tonight. By the way, just to let y'all know, the Lee Spring Army is our community. That's what it's called. If you are a subscriber, you're automatically a part of the Lee Spring Army. So if you want to be a Leaf Springer, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button, because then you become one. Anyways, I think that there should be a plan in place. I don't even know where the hell I was going before I said that, because I got caught up in trying to explain what the Lee Spring Army is, because I know a lot of people are gonna be like, what the hell is that? But anyways, with that, thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message. Y'all do that each and every day, and it's and y'all amaze everyone who's watching with y'all's incredible skills of being able to listen to those dots and dashes and then come up with a message out of them. It's absolutely incredible, and I got to thank each and every one of y'all for doing that. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and our next one goes to the Midwest Vikinger, who says, Enforcer, is it true that Russia has used chemical weapons of a sort, and if Russia blows the plant, they quote-unquote nuke themselves, and the jet stream flows to Moscow, and so will the fallout?
We haven't heard of them using any supposed chemical weapons. We haven't seen that anywhere. Trying to melt down the ZMPP would most likely be classified as a nuclear attack only, not a chemical attack. I would also say that, one second, reread that question again, Matthew, so I can hear the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, it said, Enforcer, is it true that Russia has used chemical weapons of a sort yet? And if Russia blows the plant, they quote-unquote nuke themselves, and then the jet stream flows to Moscow, and the fallout follows with it.
From what we understand, the jet stream over Ukraine is usually prevailing in a northwestern direction towards Poland and the Scandinavian countries, and then that jet stream sweeps down into the United Kingdom, and then kind of makes a the best way to explain it is like a bowl shape as it makes its way to Halifax and Nova Scotia. So I hope that addresses that the best we know. It wouldn't actually end up causing a lot of damage to Russia, but it would cause a lot of radioactive fallout and damage to the Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine, such as the Zaporizhzhia Oblast and the Kherson Oblast down here in this area. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and our last one of this first question segment goes to ABCD, who says, is Shoigu really going to resign to be replaced by Putin's former bodyguard, Alexander Demin?
At this moment, that's what we're hearing. We don't know if that's true or not. We haven't heard an official statement from the Russian government about that yet, but we are hearing a rumor that Duman is going to be the replacement for Shoigu. We don't know if that's really going to happen. That would be quite bizarre, because I have to remind everyone, Shoigu has been in that position for over a decade at this point. He has been the corruption master of the Ministry of Defense, so it would be pretty bizarre for Putin to remove someone like him who has been around for so long to replace him with someone like Durin, who hasn't really done anything. So I would say it's possible. That's what everyone's saying. That's the rumor right now, but we haven't gotten an official confirmation from the Russian government that that's going to be their plan of action. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment.
And that was actually our last one of the segment.
Oh, really? What? Well,
Yeah.
Well,
No doubt.
with that, it's now time for us to move back into the news and to move on into this bombshell. The Ukrainians crossed the Dnipro River and began a firefight near Oleski. And we got video footage both from Kherson and also from a drone flying over that area as the BTR-82 started to try and cover the Russians' retreat. Here is the clip. And take a listen. Oh my. That's a whole firefight over there, baby. They made it over to the other side. We can also see some explosions, it appears, in the river, possibly. We hear the firefight still continuing over there. We can see the destroyed Antonovsky Bridge right over there. And we can also see the flash of an explosion over there as the firefight still continues in between the Ukrainian forces that have landed on that side of the river and the Russian forces. This was then
Sounded like
accompanied...
they had the rifles with like the 2-round burst.
Yeah, to the MP5s with the 2-round burst, the ATF kind. But anyways, moving on into this next clip, we also saw a drone flying over the area, filming a Russian BTR-82, appearing to lay down fire onto Ukrainian forces, possibly to allow Russian infantry in the area to withdraw and reform a new defensive position. What we are seeing at the beginning, I'll show y'all real quick on Google Maps, is the highway that is, as the map tries to further define itself. Come on, define yourself. On this film is right here. Right here is where the drone is flying at. So it's looking from here northwards towards the river and towards the Antonovsky Bridge, and that's where our video begins. So keep that point relevant. This is the oh, wait a minute. It appears we are going through lag. We are. Matthew, can you hear me?
Oh,
God!
yeah, I can still hear you.
Oh, we'll try and wait this out because we just flatlined.
It's a little delay here, Logan.
Oh, yeah. We're going to try and wait it out because it appears that we flatlined here for a minute. Sorry, everyone. We are in the middle of a lag attack, so we'll be waiting this thing out. And I'll be throwing out a lag alert. So we'll be waiting for that to
might
pass.
be back.
I think we might be back. So tell me when this message ends from me. Okay, I'm guessing that it's...
yeah, I heard you.
Okay, good. I think we're back for the large part. I'd also like to apologize to everyone for a moment. Sorry about that. We don't really know what that is, whether it be internet issues or a DDoS attack. We're not really sure at the moment. That happened right before stream as well, and actually during our 10-minute countdown. Please bear with us on that, because we wish we could control that stuff. Sadly, it's out of our control completely whenever that kind of stuff happens. Anyways... the video we're watching starts here with the drone looking north along the highway, and so keep that in mind. We can see the gunfire of the 30mm cannon on top of this BTR-80, the Russian BTR-80, as the drone now turns around looking in the direction of Oleski, and we can now see this Russian BTR-80 racing down the highway and firing into the populated area over to the right side of the highway. The BTR is continuing to fire. It appears that it's firing wildly, most likely some sort of suppressive fire, and we can also see those 30mm shells flying across the river and right into the residential homes inside of Kherson. We can see the BTR-80 is still wildly firing across the entire area. And we can see someone walking around right there. We can't really tell if that's a Russian soldier or a Ukrainian one at this moment. We can see the BTR-80 still firing at what may be Ukrainian positions in that area, as it now maneuvers itself to the other side of the highway and then begins to move forward again. Once again, sporadically firing across the entire area. It looks like it may not exactly know where the Ukrainians are, but it is firing away. We now see the BTR-80 has looped around to wherever those guys were. We can see them here. And they are Russians carrying a wounded soldier. We now see the BTR-80 come to a stop. The Russians begin to move the wounded soldier on into the BTR-80 through the side door. We can see the BTR-80 continuing to fire. We now see some smoke puffing from the BTR-80. We're not sure if that's a smoke grenade or if it was just hit by something. We can see the BTR still sitting there. We can see this drone switch to infrared. I'm not really sure if that is infrared. And now we can see an explosion near the BTR-80, which may be Ukrainian artillery. We can now see the BTR-80 rolling away as it's now receiving return fire. We can see the BTR-80 at this moment. We see some smoke coming up from the highway, and we can also see a Ukrainian position on the other side of the river laying down fire onto that Russian BTR as it now tries to retreat from the area, and now artillery is raining down on this side. We can now see the BTR-80 once again, and it appears to have made a lucky escape for Ukrainian artillery, just making it out of there right in time before the artillery started to fall and evacuating the one wounded Russian soldier from that firefight. At the moment, we still understand that Ukrainian forces have made a strong foothold on that side of the Antonovsky Bridge in the Oleski area, but we don't have any other news beyond that, but that is still major nonetheless. Also, really quickly, once again to reiterate this, we are checking behind the scenes for any additional news about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and it appears that we haven't gotten any additional news at this moment of anything happening at this point. And so we're now going to be moving on into the rest of the news and moving on into our location unknowns, which we have a few of. Starting off with our first clip, we saw War Gonzo and Prigozhin a little while ago. Of course, this wasn't recent or anything. This wasn't yesterday. As many of y'all know, War Gonzo has gone the way of the dodo, and Prigozhin has also disappeared. But this was an interesting clip of a interview that they had from a while ago, around a month or two ago. You're not being given more ammo because you might turn your guns on Moscow and storm the Kremlin. These kind of concerns, how unfounded are they? Whether we'll march to Moscow? Well, their justification is that Wagner PMC has reached a certain autonomy. Prigozhin has certain political ambitions. He can take his private army, turn it around, and assert power in Russia. About marching to Moscow, it's an interesting thought, but we haven't thought about it. I wasn't suggesting you do. And then they both start laughing.
Man, Prigozhin's sitting there thinking in his mind, oh shit, he's on to me, and he's laughing it off.
Dude, I love the way he responded to that. Listen to this. Look at him. He's like,
look at that look on his face. He's like, is he buying this BS?
Oh,
and
man.
that War Gonzo, who's now 10 feet under, is sitting there wondering. I think he's true. I think he's telling the truth.
Man, I gotta be honest with you, man. War Gonzo, before he got whacked by the Ukrainian special forces out there on the battlefield, War Gonzo was laying out some raw facts right here. He was like, they're scared of you overthrowing the government, and then Prigozhin sat there and looked at him and went, how the hell does he know? And he went, no, I'm not thinking about doing that, man. Promise. Pinky promise.
He looks a little fearful in the face right here in this frame.
Yeah, he does. He looks like he's like, did he just figure out everything I plan on doing? He may actually have. But anyways, I just thought that would be something funny to show. We never saw that interview before, and that was foreshadowing. If that was a book that was written like Lord of the Rings or something, they would call that foreshadowing in the book. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on to this very interesting post today I saw on Twitter, which showed some amazing artwork. This is a thanks to the French for providing the Caesar SPG. Many of y'all know that is a French mobile artillery piece. You can see it right there in the background. And I just had to say, I don't know what created the artwork. I don't know if this is AI created or if this was created by a person, but this was incredibly cool. It is Julius Caesar right here, actually, and then the Caesar SPG in the background firing a shell. I thought that was incredibly cool artwork, and I just wanted to show that to y'all because I thought that was a great a great way to show thanks from Ukraine for getting the Caesar SPG. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on to the next one, where we also saw some Ukrainian soldiers climbing off of a BTR-4, and they also showed something fairly interesting on this BTR-4 that we've never seen. We can see them climbing down, and we can see something up there we've never seen. Anti-tank guided missiles on the turret. That's new. Most BTR-4s, and I'll show y'all here, don't have anti-tank guided missiles mounted onto their turret. And so let me go find one, and let me show y'all the picture. Here is your standard BTR-4. And correction, apparently I'm blind. They normally do have 2 anti-tank guided missiles on the turret. You can see them right there. That is not a normal BTR-4. You can see them again right there. You can see them right there. For some reason, throughout this entire war, I never saw the anti-tank guided missiles that were mounted onto the side of the BTR-4's turret. So correction there, that is nothing new. But we can see these guys climbing off of a normal, completely normal BTR-4. We now see them all grouping up and hanging out for a little bit, all of them wearing blue tape. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there, and really nice to see that the Ukrainians are still operating those BTR-4s on the battlefield. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next one, where we also saw that there were some Russian losses. And they were quite considerable.
Lord Bobcats, that's a nice catch. And not the best catch, but a nice one.
Not the best catch, but it is still a good catch. 4 special equipment vehicles destroyed. One of those was that Caterpillar excavator we saw in the Kursk area earlier. Also, on top of that, we saw that the Russians lost 720 Russian soldiers over the past 24 hours. A fairly considerable number, just 80 short of an entire battalion tactical group actually being wiped out in the course of a single day. However, numbers in most categories beyond that have actually been a little below average. There were only 2 armored personnel carriers destroyed over the past 24 hours, meaning that there was practically no armored personnel carriers destroyed today, well below average. We also saw that 4 supply trucks were also destroyed as well, a fair bit below average. However, one number that was right in the average was 6 main battle tanks. That is exactly in the range of the average amount of tanks destroyed, which is anywhere in between 5 and 7. We also saw that the Ukrainian counter battery had still been at work and had proven to get some results with 19 artillery pieces destroyed. We also saw 12 drones destroyed as well, along with 5 MLRSs. We also saw that the Ukrainians were able to shoot down 41 cruise missiles overnight, as well as destroy 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems and destroy 4 special equipment vehicles. Altogether, a pretty good day for the Ukrainian military. Of course, the frontline numbers of APVs and tanks that were destroyed was a little low, but still not a bad day at all. We're now going to be moving on from our location unknowns and on down into the northeastern area, where we have seen that the 109th has been taking out some more Russian forces with their drone bomblets. Take a look. When you see them lining up the drone bomblet, it is an F1 grenade. We now see the F1 grenade fall into the outpost, and it starts a fire. That's not an F1 grenade, y'all. That's an incendiary. I've never seen an incendiary like that before.
That's oh no, the gun's right there next to it. That's a shame.
Oh, wait a minute. It's one of those jank 30 millimeters, I think, that they turned into a machine gun, and it was in a little outpost, and now all of it's on fire. Now the ammo's exploding. That was a fairly good find by them. They found one of the heavier frontline machine guns the Russians were using in that area and destroyed it. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in the northeast and towards the direction of Seversk, where we saw a Ukrainian peon providing artillery support to the attacking Ukrainians in this direction. We can see them firing right there, and we can now see the crew running forward to reload. We can see it right here again, from another angle. We can see it from even another angle. And look, you wouldn't believe it, but there's even no other angles. Those were all of the angles of the peon firing, and hopefully its artillery fire was quite accurate and was able to destroy some Russian forces behind the lines. Moving on from that, we also saw, a little bit further behind the lines, that a Russian Strela was destroyed in the area between Popasna and Bakhmut. We can see that Strela right there. We can hear the grave rave music playing as the Strela looks around in the sky for air targets. Little does it know there's a drone watching it right now, getting ready to destroy it. We now see them backing the Strela into a pre-prepared dugout with a small net over it to try and camouflage it. And we can now see the artillery coming in and wiping that Strela away, the surface-to-air missiles firing off and clearing out everything in front of it. Very nice. With that, we're now going to be moving on.
Let him cook.
Let him cook. Anyone can cook. And the Russians certainly are cooking, I'll tell you, man. They're being cooked to congratulations right now. But moving on from that and into the Bakhmut area, we also saw that over the past 24 hours, Ukrainian forces have been able to make some advances in all directions in Bakhmut. They've been able to advance a kilometer, both in the north and also in the south, and it appears that they are now going to begin the battle for Kurtimivka again. This is a linchpin of the front in this area, and if the Ukrainians are able to take Kurtimivka, they will be able to start making larger gains in this direction, most likely. Moving on from that, little summary of the Bakhmut area, our first clip shows the 3rd Brigade in some intense fighting. I have to let y'all know this up front. We're going to have to stop this video around the 5-minute mark. It is amazing up until the 5-minute mark, but after the 5-minute mark, I can't show what's in this video. If y'all want to see what's in the video, click on the link in the description below, and it'll take you directly to this map. You can go click on this marker and the link in it, and then go watch this video for yourself. But nonetheless, here is the video, and I also got to skip past the first part. And so, let me get us right here. They're leaving! And we hear the firefight going on in between the 3rd Brigade and the Russian forces in the distance. We hear the Ukrainian cussing out the Russians as he fires a rifle grenade over there into their position. Now the Ukrainian is getting down into the trench. We now see this Ukrainian soldier calling to the cameraman. And also, one second, I'll have to pass by that real quick as well. Skipping forward in the firefight. But you see grenades exploding in front of the Ukrainians. As the intense firefight continues, we can see another one exploding over there to the right and throwing some leaves and debris down into the trench on top of the soldiers. We now see the Ukrainians firing over the berm again, the Russians only 40 yards away in the tree line. Another explosion. The Ukrainians stand up and look around, and they check on their squad. Their squad is intact at the moment. We now hear the Ukrainian announce that the Russians had packed up and started running out of the tree line. We now see the Ukrainians firing at them as they retreat. The Ukrainians fire rifle grenades and fire their small arms as the Russians begin to retreat out of the area. We now hear Russian artillery coming in on top of the Ukrainians as the Russians try and suppress the Ukrainian advance now that their forces have collapsed in the area. We now hear that they're taking fire from the right side further out into the fields, most likely several hundred yards away. They begin firing suppressive fire to try and get the Russians' heads down. And we now hear the order being given for them to continue to advance forward through this tree line. The Ukrainians continue through this waist-height trench through the tree line.
Damn, son, it's a little intense, isn't it?
Yeah, this is very intense. We now see them tossing some nades to each other so that way they can start sending them towards the Russians as presents. And we can also hear at this moment in the firefight, the Ukrainians are demanding for the Russians to come out unarmed and surrender to them, so that way the fight doesn't have to carry on. But in that, if they don't want to, they'll give them a grenade for extra persuasion. Of course, pin-pulled and everything else. We can also hear that they're having a little conversation about the headphones they're wearing, helping them out. They're most likely the noise-canceling headphones that amplify people talking, but also cut out the noise of gunfire.
Нема! Гранати!
We're now hearing it being called out that there are Russians to the left and right of the Ukrainians at this point on both sides of the tree line, and the firefight is now picking up to an extreme. The Ukrainians are firing in every direction, trying to put the Russians' heads back down and making sure that they continue to keep the advantage. We can see an artillery explosion land nearby, throwing dirt on them as they continue to move on down.
Зліва і справа підари. Граната!
We can see them lobbing grenades forward to clear out the Russians as they continue the advance.
Прямо идем, прямо идем! Ниже силуэт, блядь!
We can see them pre-firing every corner to make sure that there are no Russians that will catch them by surprise.
Все, Марк, 200!
And we have to end the video right there. It appears that an artillery shell, maybe a mortar shell, landed near the berm of the trench and ended up hitting directly alongside these Ukrainian soldiers. The cameraman was luckily unharmed. However, the man right here that we saw in front of him, he appears to have possibly been wounded in the legs later on. We can't show that on stream, but if y'all would like to see the heroic actions of the 3rd Brigade as they continue to push the Russians back in this area, and its entirety from beginning to end, you can click on the link in the description below for the day 487 map, and you can go and click on this link. It is the one that is right outside of Klishkivka here on the map, and you can watch the entire video uninterrupted for yourself. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that video showing the brave men in the 3rd Brigade who are continuing to bring the fight to the Russians and push them on out of their trench lines around Klishkivka as they continue on. Moving on into our next clip, we also see that the Presidential Brigade was using their drone forces today to take out some additional Russians. Would you like an espresso?
Wow. Yeah, can I please have my hot latte, please?
Yeah, we can see the Ukrainians giving them up hot down there.
Oh, and now you have a scone to go with it.
And we can now see another clip of another trench line in the southern area as the bomblet hits, and it appears to have been quite accurate. We can now see another one, but we're going to end it right there. Y'all get the gist. We're moving on to the next clip, where we also saw that the Ukrainians were able to destroy 3 Russian main battle tanks today in the Olchi group near the area of Kurtimivka, which, just to show y'all where Kurtimivka is, it is the linchpin of the entire southern flank for the Russian forces here, and really their only anchor point. And so with that, here's the clip. We can see our first FPV kamikaze drone lining up on the Russian tank, moving towards it on the road, and we can now see it getting ready for its little bull run right into the front of the tank. It's coming on in, and we were able to see that that was a T-80 BV right there, knocked out right in front of everyone. And we now see the FPV drone hitting right there, right near the top of the gun breech. And we can see a healthy bit of smoke coming from the tank as it continues to slowly roll down the road, showing that that tank has been knocked out and will begin to brew up here in a moment. We can also see the tank in an act of desperation firing off smoke grenades to try and hide itself from any Ukrainian surveillance. That is unsuccessful. We can now see the next FPV drone. And we can see it's chasing down a Russian tank that is leaving the battlefield. And it hits right on the rear engine bay. Another T-80B destroyed right there. A T-80BV being hit in the engine bay like that means it will brew up and burn out. We can now see another T-80B getting hit as well. Right in the back of the...
Fast explosive run on that one.
Yeah, that was a quick one. And that one immediately started to explode as well from that hit. So that appears to be an incredibly successful hit. May have hit right on the very rear of the engine bay where the turret ring is, and it may have been able to actually breach the hull and catch some ammunition on fire from what we can see out here. We now see this drone flying on in. Sadly, we didn't get to see that. It appears to have been a Scooby-Doo van, but they cut off the footage before we could see it hit. But we did see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy 3 entire main battle tanks in the Kurtubivka direction around Bakhmut today, which is significantly weakening the support that the Russian infantry are getting in that area, and most likely going to help the Ukrainians to push forward. Moving on further down into the Marinka direction, we also saw an abandoned BTR being destroyed by a Ukrainian FPV drone here. This was not followed by frontline activity. Ooh, that's bad copyright. We're gonna mute that.
That's so copyrighted.
That is so copyrighted. My life flashed before my eyes. Ooh, and we can see that FPV drone certainly hit the BTR, and it went up in flames. It really just blew up.
That's like a perfect example of a copyright strike hitting someone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But with that, that's the end of that clip, and very nice to see another BTR knocked out. Moving on from there and moving on down into the southern front, we've been seeing a large amount of video activity and evidence coming out from the southern front. But I would like to give you all a quick update at the moment. I am looking at our Twitter feed right now, and let me make sure to refresh it just to make sure we're getting the, let's see here. So this is breaking news. Everyone, Shoigu is under house arrest at this exact moment. That just came out 4 minutes ago. The FSB has put Sergei Shoigu under house arrest. Y'all heard that here first.
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
That is actually incredible.
That's hard to believe.
That means that there was an agreement by the Russian government and Prigozhin that Shoigu would be removed from his position. And at this moment, I want to make this very clear to everyone. According to, and let me make sure I'm getting this right, OSINT Defender, the FSB has just put Sergei Shoigu under house arrest. And so, hey, look, they actually did agree on something with the Wagner. We're now going to be moving on from that breaking news. We still have not seen any news of a meltdown happening at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant at this point. We are still keeping an eye on that news. We were told by Ukrainian intelligence that may be happening today. They said it will most likely be happening within the next 24 hours. That was around 4 or 5 hours ago, and we are still looking and waiting for any news to come out on that. Hopefully, and, you know, of course, this would make that information untrue, but hopefully it is not the case and the day passes uneventfully. Moving on.
You might start seeing a massive purge start happening in the Russian government. Even if they didn't come to an agreement to get rid of Shoigu, you might see Putin decide that he needs to get rid of any possible threats to his power, since now people are questioning whether or not he's a strong leader.
That's true, and I believe that Prigozhin is going to be the catalyst for a purge to begin, and that will also start to create more instability and anxiety in the Russian government, as people will be trying to find a way to get out of it or possibly survive by overthrowing the government. So I'm sure that more unrest is on the way. Speaking of unrest, a lot of Russian soldiers were uneasy and unrested in the Volodar area today, as the Ukrainians have been using a combination of new technologies, including their Panzerhaubitze 2000s and Poseidon drones, to find and destroy Russian forces. We can see the Poseidon drone right there taking off and flying out on its way, and we can now see their Panzerhaubitze 2000 rolling forward. We can see a Russian vehicle out there on the tree line, and being hit by the Panzerhaubitze with the Poseidon spotting the vehicle. And we can see that vehicle has joined the graveyard. It appears to have been a BMP. Meanwhile, this is what it looked like inside of the Panzerhaubitze cabin. I'm going to have to mute that. But we can see the tank doing all of the heavy lifting, and then it literally puts the shell up at the breach, and it's like, would you like to write a message? And the Ukrainians are like, oh, sure. So they just start writing a message onto the shell before they fire it.
And also, it looks here, just for some more information about Shoigu, that Anton Gerashenkov put out that a Russian Telegram channel is the source of the information, and they're saying that Shoigu is in isolation under the watch of personal security, comprised of FSS employees, FSB agents, as well as some criminal investigators within the MOD.
And very interesting to hear. And so y'all have heard it here first. That just happened 4 minutes ago. Shoigu is officially under some kind of house arrest at this moment. We can now see the Panzer Haubitz firing as well, and very nice to see that the Ukrainians are using all advanced technology available to them in combination, in concert with each other, to find and destroy Russian forces. Moving on from that news and into the direction of Velika Novosilka, we also saw Ukrainian tanks driving forward to the battlefield. And I gotta mute that, but we can see the Ukrainians taking a rest on the side of the road near their Humvee as this tank goes driving on by. It's a T-72B. And that's the end of that clip. Moving on from that little clip showing Ukrainians moving forward to action in the battlefield, we also saw that a hidden BMP-2 of the Russian army was hit and destroyed in this area near Staromanivka. Here we can see the BMP-2's rear section, it appears, and we can see the drone bomblet crash right into the top of the BMP, exploding and immediately beginning the brewing up process. We now see a second bomblet hit on the exact same spot, furthering the damage to the BMP and ensuring that it will brew up and burn on out. We now see another bomblet. This one appears to be heading more towards the direction of the turret, and it appears to have exploded on the turret, giving it its third hole in the top of the APC.
And also, by the way, if you want more news about Shoigu's arrest, a little bit more details, we have it on our Twitter page, by the way, and I'm putting the link in the chat.
And I'll be making sure to give a plug to the Twitter here in a minute, because that is where our live news is coming out right now of Shoigu being under house arrest. We can now see this BMP-2 here in the Staromanivka area, in the meanwhile, brewing up after it's been stricken 3 times by Ukrainian drone bomblets. And that fire is quite delightful. That's the end of that clip right there, and of course, I have to tell you all about our Twitter.
Peter, the Twitter's here.
So, let me go to the Twitter. And right
Beat
here,
the Twitter.
This is our Twitter. You can actually find a link to this Twitter in the description below this live stream right now, and this is where we're coming out with live news. You can see right here from OSINT Defender, just 10 minutes ago, Shoigu has been put under house arrest. That happened 10 minutes ago, and we just reported it live on stream. And so make sure to go and follow our Twitter, because sometimes the Twitter, like right now, is able to get to the breaking news before we're able to get to it live on air, because, you know, of course, this is happening live, and our Twitter is able to more adeptly keep up with the exact live news when it's happening by the minute, more so than we are here on the live stream. It's still live news, and it's still happening over the past day, but it's not up to date as in just 11 minutes ago up to date. So make sure to go follow the Twitter, because you can keep up to date with news and information that's coming out from our channel here. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little plug and moving on from the area of Staromanivka and down towards Wheelopole, where we saw that the Ukrainians were also hitting more Russian positions in this area. And we can see that they're getting some fire orders here with their SPG-9. They're now lining it up. And they've now given the order to fire. The SPG-9 fires, and we can now see their round impacting in the center of the tree line. It appears to have been a little off from their target, perhaps. It appeared that their target was over here where the bounce cursor is, but it was still a fairly accurate shot for an SPG-9. That's the end of the clip. But very nice to see the Ukrainians are using their SPG-9s to lay down fairly accurate fire onto Russian forces. Moving on from there into the area of Robotine, we also saw that a Russian supply truck was destroyed in this area. We'll also be getting to a frontline summary in this direction as well here in a moment. Well, you now see the Russian supply trucks all here on the side of the road in something of a very miniature motor pool being stricken by Ukrainian artillery. From what we can tell, these are ammunition trucks, and carrying vital ammunition for the Russians to continue on their war effort. We can see one of those trucks get hit and begin exploding. We can see the other trucks in the motor pool over here, lined up along the tree line, and we can now see that ammo truck going up in a fiery explosion, as the others appear to be waiting their turn. And we can now see the next ammunition truck being hit, and that one will also have a very fiery explosion. Oh, I'm sorry, that was actually a fuel truck. We can now see it putting out putrid black smoke into the air, and the Russians going, Shoigu! I got asthma, blitz! But now we can see even more fuel trucks being hit as they're wiping out the entire motor pool. We can also see
this legendary Ukrainian aimbot that we're being told about?
Yes, this is that hacking aimbot thing that they've got. And we can now see the next shell landing in the motor pool, and that one appears to have hit an ammunition truck. Nope, it was another fuel truck. Sorry, everyone. These are all fuel trucks. The only ammunition truck was out there in the middle of nowhere, and then they just put all the fuel trucks near the flammable forest on the side of the road. As A.F. Kaplan said, hot stuff. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip, of course, seeing the Ukrainians destroy a large amount of Russian supplies right near the battlefield, and of course we've already covered the Storm Z news. So now, to give you all a little bit of a frontline analysis, according to what we're seeing on Deep State UA. Ukrainian forces have, of course, been able, at this point from what we've heard, to capture the town of Robotine. This is massive news, and one of the major villages heading on their way to Tokmak, down one of the few paved roads in this area. On top of that, we also heard that Ukrainian forces over the past 24 hours have been able to make a fairly significant advance in the area around the small village of Rivnepil. An entire battalion tactical group sits inside of the town of Rivnepil, and it appears that the Ukrainians are in the process of an encirclement on Rivnepil. If they are able to successfully encircle the town and the Russians do not withdraw from this area, they will have been able to capture an entire battalion tactical group intact, most likely with their equipment, and take 800 more Russian soldiers out of the war in a single fell swoop. We will not know if that's going to happen or not at the moment. We don't know how fast their progress will be now that they're starting to reach the rear lines around Rivnepil, but we'll have to wait and see. However, we do know that the Ukrainians are making progress. It's not massive progress. It is progress nonetheless. As you can see, there has been front-wide progress in the south. It is a little slow, and the Ukrainians have restarted the front-wide offensive, this time trying to integrate their newly learned tactics and strategies after they ran into first contact with Russian forces in the south. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of the southern front and on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelensky. The news is not over yet tonight. We'll constantly be keeping up to date with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as the rest of the news, as the rest of our stream unfolds for the night. But without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on the 487th day of the war. This time, I found one. I had to get this one off of the president's website because it appears they're starting to use the bot to translate everything now. So I wanted to make sure we got Zelensky's original voice. So I got one with his original voice with subtitles. And so without further ado, here is the speech, and this is the best graphics quality we can get, which is 240p. Very sorry.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Щойно завершив серію міжнародних розмов з президентом Сполучених Штатів Байденом, з прем'єр-міністром Канади Трюдо, з президентом Польщі Анджеєм Дудою. Позитивні розмови дуже потрібні саме зараз для всіх нас. Перше. Звичайно, ми обговорили бойові дії на передовій, наші активні дії. Я подякував партнерам за надану підтримку. Вона дуже вагома і реально допомагає нашим воїнам рухатись вперед. Зараз російські окупанти зазнають втрат, які нам і потрібні. Кожна їхня втрата – це довгострокове посилення свободи. Обговорили і подальше зміцнення українських воїнів. Я дякую партнерам за розуміння наших потреб, далекобійних потреб. Особливо я вдячний президенту Байдену і Сполученим Штатам за надійність патріотів. Обговорили посилення нашої артилерії, МЛРС та іншого. Друге, ситуація на Запорізькій атомній станції. Увага світу до наявної російської загрози на Запорізькій станції, на жаль, поки недостатня, як була недостатньою реакція на російський підрив Каховської гідроелектростанції та свідоме намагання російських терористів влучити в дамбу іншого водосховища у Кривому Розі. Довів партнерам інформацію, яка є у нас, у нашої розвідки, про російський сценарій з мінуванням Запорізької АЕС, який для терористів очевидно затверджено. Маємо і мусимо зробити всі разом у світі цілком конкретні кроки, щоб не допустити будь-яких радіаційних інцидентів. Третє. Чим довше триває російська агресія, тим більшу деградацію вона викликає і в самій Росії. Один із проявів такої деградації – те, що російська агресія поступово повертається в рідну гавань. Ми обмінялися в розмовах з лідерами оцінками того, що відбувається в Росії, бачимо розвиток ситуації однаково і знаємо, як реагувати. Ще одне, дуже важливі зустрічі відбулись сьогодні в Копенгагені. формат політичних радників, команда Офісу Андрій Єрмак, а також Андрій Сибіга, а також Ігор Жовква зустрілись з політичними радниками лідерів Туреччини, Індії, Японії, Південної Африки та інституцій Європейського Союзу. Наближаємо реалізацію формули миру і для цього залучаємо якнайширше коло партнерів. Незмінним топ-пріоритетом є і відносини з Євросоюзом. Щотижня додаємо ґрунту для набуття повноправного членства. Залишається і усього лише 15 днів до початку саміту НАТО в Вільнюсі. Ми робимо все, щоб саміт мав реальний зміст, сильний зміст, позитивні рішення для України у Вільнюсі. Це єдино можливі позитивні рішення для нашої спільної безпеки в Європі та загалом в Альянсі. Я дякую всім, хто підтримує Україну. Я дякую пану президенту Байдену, Конгресу, обом партіям, усім американцям за історичне зміцнення свободи у світі. Дякую пану прем'єр-міністру Трюдо, усім канадійцям за незмінну підтримку. Дякую пану президенту Дуді та кожному в Польщі, хто стоїть з Україною пліч-опліч у захисті Європи. Слава нашим воїнам, слава кожній бригаді, яка зараз на фронті рухається вперед. Таврійський напрямок. Ви молодці. Дякую. Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
Slava Ukraini. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that begins a big question. A question that we've had the entire night. How's the nuclear power plant doing? So let me find out real quick. I bet some of y'all are thinking, oh, we're about to get into the questions and polls and everything. Not yet. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let me move on from there. Let's see here. Let me make sure we're keeping up to date with all of the news that is going on right now as we're live on air.
I think we are up to date on it. I think we're caught up.
I think we are caught up. I just wanted to make sure there, and it appears that nothing major has developed in the meantime. The only thing that's happened while we've been live on air is that Shoigu has been put under house arrest. That's pretty major in its own right, but, you know, that's all that's happened. Luckily, the nuclear power plant has not melted down yet, but we are still watching and seeing if that will happen. And so with that, Matthew, take it away.
All right. So before we get into our polls, I have to report on the fundraiser. We have reached $7,000 raised
Holy
for
moly.
Razom for Ukraine. So tremendous work. We are so far above goal. It's not even funny. I'm not even laughing about it. It's so serious. But anyways, all jokes aside, it's time to call off our top donors once again of the night. Up first, we have a $125 donation from Mike G. We have a $100 from Eric Hutchins, as well as a $60 from I Am by Rocker, and we have a $50 from Joshua Matkin, Steve Watkins at Work, Marion Deemer, Rosalie Woolman, Trister1, Firefly 1873, and also Sharon Flynn. And once again, even if we have not called your name off, thank you all so very much for the generosity. We do notice it and we appreciate it very much. And you're helping us reach even higher than $1 million raised for charity. So tremendous work. And Sunday nights are always I think, our most favorite night of the week. But unfortunately, what say you?
And I got to thank every single person right now who's helped this fundraiser to get to where it is. We are sitting at $7,070 right now. Thanks to every single one of y'all who has helped to support this fundraiser. And all of the credit to that goes to the Lee Spring Army and all of the great, amazing folks inside of it that make up the Lee Spring Army. Every single one of y'all who have donated tonight, I've got to thank y'all all so much, because that is going to go directly to Razom to Ukraine to help them to continue to help save lives inside of Ukraine, whether it be through medical support, whether it be from keeping the lights on literally by running generators, or feeding people with foodstuffs. They are going to be helping people to stay alive. And if it wasn't for y'all's support, another $5,000, or at this point, $7,070 of aid and support wouldn't be able to make its way to them. And I got to thank y'all all so much once again for making such an incredible contribution to those folks, because I'm sure that if they knew who all of y'all were as individuals, they would thank each and every one of y'all for helping them to keep on going. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on into those questions, Matthew, those leading questions of the night, the ones that have a lead on them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our first poll says Prigozhin has not been seen since leaving Rostov, and might he be in Russian custody? It looks like 43% said he went into deep hiding, 23% said unsure, 19% said he's either dead or assassinated, and 15% said he is in Russian custody. And on this one, it's really hard to say. I personally doubt that he's in hiding. I have a feeling he's either been assassinated or the Russians have him in custody. And now that Shoigu has been arrested and he's now under house arrest, that adds a little bit of a complication to the situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say he's probably in custody. I don't think they would have offed him yet. They're probably going to wait on that. Honestly, they'll probably defer the sentence on that for a little while, maybe until all the publicity and all of everything that's happened kind of fades away. So I think they'll wait on that. As far as where he really is, who knows? I would honestly have to declare ignorance on it, because he could be dead. I find it to be unlikely, but he could possibly be dead, or he could be in hiding. Who really knows? But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You know, I have a feeling that if the Russians have taken Prigozhin into custody, they're likely planning to have him make a forced statement like you see in North Korea. They'll bring people out and have them profess that they've made a grand mistake, and they'll tell the forces to stand down and tell Wagner to go back to their bases and fight for Russia.
Man,
I'm not sure if that would work, but, you know, that might be Russia's next move.
Man, they're going to have him coming out like Otto there in North Korea. You know, he's going to be walking in front of Putin's like 100-foot long table. He's going to be at the very end of it. Putin's going to be at the other. He's going to say, "What do you have to say for yourself?" And Prigozhin's going to say, "I'm so sorry." And he's going to do like the whole shoulder thing while he's crying. He's going to ugly cry and everything. They're probably going to, they may try and have him do something like that. I wouldn't throw that out of the equation entirely yet. But who knows? Who really knows? Anyways, for that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, today, the UN urgently called on Wagner and the Russian government to de-escalate the insurrection in Russia. And what are your thoughts? 44% said the UN needs to shut up. 23% said, why would they say that? 12% said unsure, and 22% said, right, it might get out of hand. And I don't know why the UN is making a big deal to tell Wagner to stand down, basically, because it only assists Ukraine to have this trouble happening in Russia. The UN is getting caught up on trying to be, I don't even know how to describe it, I guess, too overly conscientious. I'm not really sure how to say it, but I think they need to shut up. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think the UN is just a stupid. I mean, like, honestly, I hate to say it and be so harsh about it, because, you know, I understand these organizations are trying to do the best thing possible, but the UN has got to be one of the stupidest organizations I've ever heard of at this point. You sit there, hey, UN, what do you have to say about the Russians killing innocent civilians in Ukraine? Hey, it's Russian Language Day, and then the coup happens in Russia, and they go, guys, calm down. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you people in the UN? Are y'all stupid or something? I don't know what's wrong with the UN. Honestly, I feel like they ought to shut the hell up at this point and just let whatever happens, because they always butt in at the wrong time and in such an aloof and stupid way. They never look good. And right now, it's like, that isn't even a UN affair, really. That's an internal, domestic Russian affair. So what in the world is the UN coming in and saying something about a domestic, internal Russian affair for? I mean, like, hell, the UN doesn't have any right. You know, and I'm saying this fairly across the board for every country, and that includes countries we hate like Russia. The UN has no right, really, unless if there are atrocities being committed, which that coup, there wasn't really any atrocities being committed from what we could tell. Almost everyone that was killed in that coup was a part of the Wagner or a part of the Russian military. Who the hell are they to come in and tell people they don't have a right to do something like that? It's like, that's just the natural ebb and flow of a country, especially like Russia. I mean, hell, they have a coup like every Monday, at least historically. So why the hell is the UN coming in and saying, hey, you can't do that? I didn't see the UN come in and detest the coup going on in Sudan right now. They haven't said anything about that. But then they're going to come in with Prigozhin sitting there and possibly overthrowing the Russian government, and then they're going to speak up on that one and go, hey, that's not right. Don't do that. It's like, come on, that's just stupid. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of the United Nations, largely because they're powerless, they're weak, and on top of that, they always come in and say the stupidest things at the worst times. But with that, that's my opinion.
The UN would be much better suited if they just stick to humanitarian operations instead of trying to get into peacekeeping and diplomacy. That stuff should be left up to individual states and not to some autonomous organization that simply roams the different countries saying basically interjecting themselves.
Yeah, and their peacekeeping is a sham. You know, like they sit there and pay these countries that hardly have a well-trained military at all to go and dress up in the blue helmets and stuff and just go wherever. And then whenever they show up there, the UN rules of engagement are so strict that they don't even do any peacekeeping. They just exist in the area, but they don't do anything to help the situation whatsoever. So it's like that's just it's a sham deal. It's like if the UN is going to be so limited on what it can and can't do that it really can't do anything, why the hell even have the UN around at this point rather than it just being a forum for nations to meet in? They're like, you know, if the UN is neutered to the point that it has no enforcement power, when peacekeepers show up, the peacekeepers don't do anything. Whenever they try and come up with a decision, the decision never goes through because if one person disagrees with it, it just can't happen. If it's going to be so limited like that, why even have paths for the UN to do anything? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I would say the UN ought to shut the hell up on this because it's not like they do anything otherwise, and I don't know what the hell they're even talking about. I saw Mark Gagne, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Gagne say the UN is great for writing international law, but then they don't even really enforce that international law. You know, it's up to the countries at large in the world to try and enforce the international law. The UN hardly does it. Well, in fact, the UN doesn't do it at all. For example, with China, whenever you see China violating international waters and trying to build artificial islands in the South China Sea to extend their coastal waters, they never step in and enforce international law there. They just let the Chinese do whatever they want, and then it's up to the United States, for the most part, to go down there and try and prove that that's not a part of China's coastal waters. And so then they don't even enforce the international laws there. They just come up with this good-sounding stuff, and then it's really up to everyone, once again, in the free-for-all the world is, to try and make these international laws mean anything.
Right. And when's the last time anything's ever been resolved in a UN General Assembly, except for allowing countries to basically show up and shout at each other and to basically call each other down, and nothing ever gets resolved?
That's, you know what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
Oh man. And then let me think of another thing that happened in the UN. Wasn't there a fist fight in the UN at one point?
Probably so. I think there was one. I can't remember who it was. I remember when I think it was Gaddafi showed up and like absolutely tore everyone apart when he got up to give his speech, and everyone just sat there listening to him, even though, you know, they were wanting to say something, and nothing ever gets resolved. Like, and even if they vote on something, there's nothing that can really be done through the votes. It's just symbolic.
Yeah, you know, like, and I'm sure y'all have all seen it at this point. The UN has had, I think, 3 votes at this point to condemn Russia, and I think almost everyone in there, except for like 4 countries, including Russia, have condemned Russia for the invasion in Ukraine. What has that done? That's done nothing. And that's what it's like every single time anything happens in the UN. It can't do anything. So what's the point of having an organization that doesn't actually have any enforceable power? There's no point in an organization like that. It's just a feel-good group at that point. It doesn't even do anything. Countries would be better off just saying, you know what, here's what I think the UN should do going forward. The UN should be stripped of everything. Peacekeeping abilities, the only thing it should be able to do is humanitarian aid, like trying to feed folks or something similar. And then rather than that, just be used as a forum for countries to meet in. That's a recognized forum around the world. That's all it should be, because those are the only 2 things the United Nations can really do. And so just streamline the thing, cut it down to those 2 basic functions, and then the rest of everything else, it's just a free-for-all like it always has been in the world. It's up to diplomacy, and whatever countries are able to do, that will be done. And so with that, I hope that addresses that, in my opinion, fairly well. Of course, you can tell I'm not a big fan of the UN. I've especially become a very big opponent of the UN ever since this war in Ukraine has happened, because they've practically been useless. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, also I pronounced Mark Gagne's name correctly. I can't believe that. One of the very few pronunciations I've gotten correct, so I'm glad to hear it. And also, real quick, shout out to M288, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser, and now we're up to $7,184. So climbing our way up. Maybe we'll reach 8,000, maybe. Perhaps, maybe 7.5 thousand, somewhere around there. That would be very nice. But anyways, moving on to our next poll question. This one says, the U.S. was aware of Wagner's plot days prior to the coup attempt, but the U.S. expected more bloodshed. And what are your thoughts? 55% said the U.S. likely had no involvement. Looks like 19% said the U.S. helped spark the coup. 14% said, I really can't tell, and maybe. And 12% said unsure. And on this one, I'll be honest with you, it's really hard to tell. It wouldn't be a bad thing if the U.S. helped spark the coup, and also I wouldn't rule it out completely. But there's nothing concrete linking the two things together. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It's never out of the question, but there's not enough proof to say that it actually was. That's actually the reason why it happened. So I'd have to say most likely it's mostly not possible, but there's a small sliver of a chance that that could have been the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the last poll we have here says, should Ukraine avoid drawing attention to itself while Russia is still enduring the Wagner fallout? It looks like 40% said no, Ukraine should speak loudly. 35% said it doesn't really matter. 19% said Ukraine should lay low for now. And 7% said unsure. And one thing I think Ukraine is doing, which is a mistake in my opinion, is they're getting very, very vocal and loud about what's going on inside of Russia. And like I said last night, do not interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And right now, Russia is having a huge issue and mistake being made right now because Putin has not put down Prigozhin in the past, and now he's risen up and tried to take him out of power. It's a bad thing to try to jump in the middle of that. I think Zelensky should lay low for now and wait to see what happens instead of drawing attention to themselves. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that would probably be the best move for him to lay low. But, you know, he might jump back up. Who knows? He's disappeared right now. He's disappeared. Oh, man, I'm telling you. They give me no respect around here. I disappear off the face of the earth. Everyone thinks I'm dead. He's disappeared right now. So who knows if he'll be coming back or not. But I would agree with Matthew on that one. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we are fresh out of polls. So we're moving on to our many live chat questions. And up first, we have one from Mark, the incompetent drone operator, who says, what makes you think that Robotine has been captured?
Robotine?
I'm assuming he means for. Oh, is that a person?
No, that's a village.
Oh, never mind.
The reason why I'm saying Robotine has been captured is because the live UA map showed a while ago that it had been captured. So let me go to the live UA map. We rarely ever use this one at this point, but let me move on down here. As you see, the maps are a little different. We use Deep State for our map, but I also base the information off of what we see on other maps, like Robotine, well, actually Live UA, and we could see here that there was a massive bulge that was created by a Ukrainian offensive a while ago. I believe it happened around 4 or 5 days ago in that area, and it did manage to capture Robotine. You can see it's on the very edge of the bulge, but that's the reason why we believe that Robotine has been taken, although on the Deep State map, you'll see that when we zoom into the area of Robotine, it is still well behind the lines, probably about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile behind Russian control positions on this map. And so that's why we're saying that Robotine may have possibly been captured, and that's why we report that on air. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
And also shout out to Colleen Emsley, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser and brought us up to 7.247. So climbing on up there, quite nice. And thank you, Colleen, for that. And moving on to our next question, we have one from Private Affair LSA, who says, if Putler can hold on until the election this coming March, do you think he'll actually run again?
If Putin will, certainly he'll run again. That's no question at all. He'll even win too, believe it or not. He'll win in a massive landslide. Even if people hate him, he'll win by like 90% of the vote, because that's how Russia works. So yeah, totally, he will. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Dale Marinkeo. I'm butchering that one, I know it for a fact. But Dale, thank you for the question. He said, what do you think of Andrew Bustamante's theory of the coup being a ploy to move 25,000 Wagner troops with the 30,000 Russians already in Belarus to threaten Kyiv? Okay. And I will say that I'm not sure if Andrew knows who that is, but he's a former CIA agent, and he's been making his rounds around the podcast. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about to me, but on this theory, I'm not totally on board with it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Okay, so I'm going to start this off by saying I don't know who that person is. Okay, now I also have to add this as well, because for some reason, whenever I say that on my stream, there are some people every once in a while who take that very personally, like it's an offensive thing. I'm not saying I don't know who they are because I'm trying to diss on them. I really just don't know who these people are. Now, to address that idea, I would have to say why. I mean, what is the actual logic behind that plan? You see, the world works on a very simple premise. You know, people are lazy. Let me ask you all this. If y'all could make a sandwich, would y'all go to the grocery store, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, let's just say that, you want to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Are y'all going to A, go to the grocery store, buy the bread and the peanut butter and jelly, and then just make it out of the stuff you buy at the grocery store? Or are you going to B, grow the wheat, grind the flour, make the bread yourself, and then also go and make the peanut butter and jelly by hand from scratch? No, y'all aren't going to do that. Y'all are going to go to the grocery store. Y'all are going to go buy the bread, the peanut butter and jelly, and y'all are going to make the sandwich out of the stuff y'all got at the grocery store, because that's easy. I mean, that's what the whole entire world works off of as a premise. It's going to be easy. And this whole plan here, if this was all just a ruse to move the Wagner from Bachmann, also I say Wagner is the same thing, but if you use this as a premise to say that they came up with this freaking overcomplicated plan with thousands of moving parts just to move the Wagner from Ukraine to northern Belarus with Prigozhin, this would be the most overcomplicated and just too overdone way to do that. There is such an easier way to do this, which is to just quietly move the Wagner from where they were to Belarus. You could just have easily done that with no excuse, no explanation. You didn't have to come up with a fake coup or anything like that. So I would say it's probably going to be not the case. It's probably won't be the case that we see that was a ploy to just try and move the Wagner from Ukraine up to Belarus. I just don't think that's the case because it's ridiculous. I mean, you could just move them. You know, does the U.S. do we have to go, like when the U.S. military ever wants to move our forces around the world, do we have to come up with some silly reason to move them? No, we just move them. They just go from point A to point B. If we see something happening in Russia, we don't have to sit there and blow up an apartment block full of people in Poland and kill 500 of them to sit there and then move like 10,000 U.S. soldiers to Poland. We just move them there because that's the easiest thing to do. It requires no explanation. It's very little effort. You just tell those units, you're going there, you pack them up on the planes, and they fly there. And that's why I'm not believing at all that this was some kind of a smoke and mirror show, because this would have just been the most overcomplicated way to move a unit a couple of 100 miles into a different front. And anyways, if this was their reasoning, why in the hell did they not do something like this before when the northern front in the beginning of the war collapsed and they moved all of those forces from the north to the southeast to begin the war down there? Why in the world didn't they make a fake coup attempt back then to justify them moving their forces around? You know, that would operate under the same premise. They were trying to move their forces around. Why didn't a fake coup happen back then? And, you know, there's no real good answer for that. It just didn't happen because it's not logical. And then some people out there are now starting to say the Russians want themselves to look weak. And that just makes no sense either, because no country in the world wants themselves to look weak. That goes against the premise of what a country strives for. Every country strives to look strong in the front of others, so that way they don't sit there and end up doing anything crazy. And so,
especially countries like Russia with dictators in charge, they definitely don't want to look weak. Their whole government is premised around being a strong man.
Yeah, and so, you know, I don't believe that for a minute. I mean, like, that guy might be a very intelligent guy. I don't know anything about him, but I would have to disagree with that theory, because it's just the most overcomplicated and convoluted way to do something that would have been fairly simple otherwise, which was to just pack them up on a train and ship them north. North, not north. And so I hope that answers that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, shout out to John Webster. He also put in a 50 to the fundraiser, and thank you very much for that. And up next, we have a question from JC, who says, have you guys heard anything about Ukraine capturing an ammo train?
I have not heard about Ukraine capturing an ammo train. I'd have to declare ignorance on that at the moment, because we focus on all the frontline news we can, but I haven't seen anything about that right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to MacDeath, who says, where is Putin? Has anyone seen him?
Well, the last time we saw him, he was in Moscow. And interestingly enough, also, I've seen a little bit of misinformation circling around about the whereabouts of Putin. There have been some people out there, a couple of them, that said that Putin has fled Russia and he's no longer in Russia. that is markedly untrue. During the entire coup, he was somewhere inside of Russia. We're assuming that at some point he ended up making his way to Ufa, which is a small town in the Ural mountain range. This is the Ural mountain range right here, and here's Ufa right on the outskirts of the Urals. We assume that he may have flown out there on the Ilyushin 96, and then for some reason they immediately made a U-turn after 40 minutes, and then turned around and flew back to Moscow, and we're thinking that Putin is most likely in Moscow at this moment. So that's where we think he is right now. He may be in Moscow, but the reports that Putin fled Russia and is in some other country is blatantly untrue. There was no facts or information or proof to show that he ever actually left Russia during this entire coup. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also here, got a new little piece of information on Twitter from the Kyiv Independent. It looks like the ISW is saying that Russian sources speculate on specifics of the Lukashenko-mediated deal with Prigozhin. And according to the Russian independent news outlet Meduza, it looks like Prigozhin tried to contact the Russian government midday on June 24th, which is yesterday, as they were moving towards Moscow. So it looks like Prigozhin might have actually reached out, according to the Russian news, if you can believe that, to try to see if he can come up with some kind of deal himself. But of course, got to take everything coming out of Russia, especially their news, with a grain of salt because they lie all the time. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to largely agree with you on that one. I would largely take that with a grain of salt. I wouldn't believe for a single moment that the Russians are telling the truth on that. Because why in the world would Prigozhin, from his position of strength, try and be the one calling them up when they're really the ones who would have to be calling him up? I don't really believe that. And I would also say I would say hold that news at arm's length. It did come out from Russian sources, and they're never really accurate on much of anything. And so with that, we are on to the next. Oh, go ahead.
And also, if he was trying to call them up, he'd probably be asking, "Oh, Bliat, do you have my wife and kids? Could you let them go?" He's probably like trying to check on that instead of like trying to surrender.
Yeah, I think that probably would be true as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Rick B, who says, "I read that War Gonzo was not confirmed dead, and can you say if he's dead or not?"
I can say he's dead. I watched a video, and I showed Matthew the video where we watched War Gonzo get iced or greased, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Lay him low, cut him to pieces. I watched it. War Gonzo is Gonzo. He's done for.
Chopped down.
Yeah, he was
greased.
Let's see, minced,
iced out. No, just iced. No out.
He was burned. Well, he wasn't burned that way. But let's see. What else can we say? Filled with lead.
Yeah. Chopped up. Something like that.
He rode the lightning. Now we're just coming up with creative.
That's going too far.
Yeah, he
whacked.
he's gone.
Liquidated.
He's done for. He's gone for good. That's one thing we know for sure. Because if that was the case, don't you think, if War Gonzo was still alive, don't you think he would have come out and proven he was alive at this point? I watched that guy get gunned down in a trench, and I showed Matthew that clip, and that guy is dead as a doornail right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Fusha Kohn, who says, "Could NATO roll from Poland through Belarus into Russia and bypass the Russian army?"
Yeah, oh yeah, they could. The Russian army is almost entirely in Ukraine and along the Ukrainian border at this point. And so any NATO offensive that began in the Baltics or from Poland and started pushing through Belarus or Russia would largely meet no resistance whatsoever at this point. The Russians are practically defenseless against the West, except for their nuclear arsenal right now. And even if they did have their entire armed force to weigh against this, they would still be defenseless because they would be going up against the entirety of the European portion of the NATO alliance as well as the United States, and that would be a losing fight. They would already be outnumbered at that point 2-1, and that 2-1 outnumbering would then be further exacerbated by the massive technological disparities in between the Russian army and all of the NATO countries combined. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Koljack, who says, "Did you see the video talking about how all three of Putin's fakes and Putin himself all showed up on TV at the same time in 3 different locations recently on their news?"
No, I did not hear about that, and I haven't seen the other Putin fakes. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I wouldn't be shocked though, because it seems like there is some more evidence mounting that he does have body doubles. And in the chaos, they might have sent all three out by accident, getting all panicked, trying to calm people down. But I mean, I wouldn't doubt that for a second.
Dude, it's like a mall Santa. You're just walking down the street in St. Petersburg. You see one of them, you go, "Look, it's Putin," and then the parents go, "Yes, child, it's Putin," or whatever, bled. And then that
Man,
guy turns.
the citizens are all looking at the TV, going, "Oh, which Putin do we have today? The fat one or the scared one, or the mean one, bliat?"
And then the kid's sitting there watching the address from Putin on TV, and he looks outside of their apartment and into the park, and he sees a Putin body double walking around out there, and he goes, "Daddy, I'm seeing a Putin out there, but he's also on TV." And then the Russian dad has to sit there, "My child, I hate to tell you this, but Putin is not real." "But Dad, you said about Santa Claus." Yes, I know, but there's not really a real Putin. There's about one for every city, Bliat. They're just everywhere. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next question goes to Putin Computers, who says, could Prigozhin have heard about the plans for the plant meltdown and decided to attempt the coup as an operation to get his guys out of the fallout zone?
Nah, I don't think so, because you see, they were mostly in Bakhmut and somewhere in between there and Luhansk, maybe even Popasna or Kadivka, and they were far enough away that the fallout wouldn't have really reached them in any significant portion. And so I think that would be... and also on top of that, from what we understand, the Wagner is being put back onto the front lines right now, but they're being dispersed amongst all Russian units, so that way they're watered down pretty much. So in a sense, he's actually putting them far closer into the radiation zone compared to where their camps were originally at, somewhere near Bakhmut and Popasna. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from New Jersey, who says, do you think that 42 million that was seized in American dollars from Prigozhin's headquarters could have been a factor?
Maybe. But that's not really a lot of money. Really,
Well, like 42 million?
Well, yeah, for Prigozhin, though, that's not really a lot of money. I think he had a larger net worth than that. Let me pull it up. Prigozhin net.
I mean, you're thinking about his net worth in rubles, I think. $42 million is probably all of it in American dollars.
No, he has a reported net worth of $1 billion US. So 47 million US dollars is like a drop in the bucket for him.
What is that in rubles, I wonder? $1 billion US dollars.
Rubles to dollars. Man, 1 ruble is equivalent to 1 cent. So this is going to be a fairly large number once we get this sorted out. So 1 billion. So let me put some zeros. That's oh
dear Lord.
Let's see. That's 10 million. So that is 100 million. So there we... Oh my God.
I think we're solidly in the trillions.
So let's see here. All right, so there's the decimal. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So he's worth 86 billion Russian rubles.
Are you sure it's billion, or is that like 8 trillion?
Wait, hang on. Okay, so that's hundreds, thousands, million. No, it's billions. I had to make sure there. It's 86 billion Russian rubles.
Wow, that's crazy.
Man, dude, he's got a lot of monopoly money. He just sits there and he pulls out those stupid-looking rubles. He's got 86 billion of them. Let me show y'all what a ruble looks like. I bet you none of y'all have seen them because I've rarely ever seen a ruble. It's this goofy-looking stuff here. I mean, it's really monopoly money.
Pull up a picture of like pieces of trash or something and say, here's a ruble.
Well, it may as well be that. I mean, it's worthless. I mean, like, look at that.
It's worth literally what the paper's worth. And they probably bought the paper for 1 cent.
Look at that. That's a 1,000 ruble banknote right there. Now, how much is that in US dollars? So that 1,000 ruble banknote is only about a $12 bill, if there was one here in America, to give you all a sense of how valueless a ruble really is. So, you know, he's pulling out the Monopoly money. He's throwing it around, you know. Let me pull up some Monopoly money. Because I'm sure it looks a lot like a ruble. And lo and behold, it does. Look at that. It's a ruble. That's a ruble split. Look.
Oh, bliat. Multicolor money.
Printed on same paper and everything. Oh, suka, bliat. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right. And our next question goes to Mom Cat Max, who says, is the potential meltdown a move by Putin to pressure Zelensky to surrender?
Maybe. There could be a lot of reasons for it. And I would say that may be one of them, considering that the counteroffensive appears to be picking up a little bit of speed at the moment. That may be the case. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next, goodness, excuse me, goodness gracious. Our next question goes to Colleen Emsley, who says, please tell me what the U.S. and NATO countries can actually do if they blow the plant.
If they blow the plant, we could get involved in the war. We could invoke Article 4, which will then invoke Article 5. We could then invoke that and have an armed response as our invocation of Article 5, and we could create a security perimeter around the nuclear power plant and begin the liquidation process. We could also try and do that before it melts down. It really just depends on what the West would want to do, but those are the two most likely options and plans. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David, who says, do you think the West will finally end Russia once and for all?
No, I think Russia will exist one way or another. The only way to make Russia cease to exist would be to commit genocide, which is unthinkable. So I would say they're going to exist in one form or another. But the modern form that Russia is existing in right now, it does appear that it's getting the nails in the coffin at the moment. And Prigozhin's coup was certainly the biggest nail. It's practically a stake that they put in that coffin at this point, that coup has served as. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Andy L., who says, are you personally prepared for a nuclear Armageddon?
No.
No, I don't think anybody is.
No, I don't think there's really a way to prepare for nuclear Armageddon. A lot of people never think about it, but in places here like the South, nobody is really prepared to live this long without air conditioning, and also other basic things that electricity provides.
Not air conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, like,
what about air?
Hell, man. This air is spicy. Drops over and
really
dies.
The only people prepared to weather an apocalypse are those people that live inside that mountain. You know, those like $1 million bunker like apartment things.
Yeah, and even still, they probably wouldn't last that long. They would probably just last a few years they have the supplies for, and then once those supplies ran out, their chance of survival would drop pretty low. It would probably be like 5 or 10% chances of survival. And a lot of people don't think about it, because nobody ever does. But modern society, as it stands, modern technology would be destroyed as soon as the exchange was over. And so it would have to be built up from the ground up again. We would practically be starting from the 18th century technologically and having to start from there again to get to where we are today. And then that doesn't include that a lot of the stuff we've made will have been destroyed. The resources that we have won't be as available as they once were, because in the modern day, a lot of people don't think, but a lot of the ways we get gas and oil nowadays is we conduct fracking. And back when we originally started to make internal combustion engines and things like that, we didn't have to frack. You literally just dug a well into the ground and the oil just came shooting right up out of it nearly. Nowadays, it's a lot more of a difficult process. And so energy like that isn't as easily and readily available as it once was. Because we've already kind of gone through that phase. So if a nuclear apocalypse happens, there wouldn't really be a way to survive it. Sure, you could stock up some supplies and maybe live for a couple of months, although it would be in misery. But after those supplies ran out, there wouldn't be much to eat. People would practically starve to death at that point. Society would cease to exist in any form. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next question we have is from Peter, who says, if Putin hypothetically is removed from power, who are the most likely candidates to fill his role? And for me, I think it's either that goon Medvedev or Prigozhin. But now Prigozhin seems to be a little bit out of the picture. Shoigu is another option, but it looks like he's going to get purged as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have said that Shoigu would have been an option. He's on the way out. Prigozhin was an option. He's on the way out. It really only leaves to me Medvedev. But then and everyone has to remember, there's always a lot of underlings out there that are never mentioned or talked about that usually end up rising the ranks in these kinds of occasions and end up becoming the leader that we have no idea about at this moment. Khrushchev was one of those people. Khrushchev was hardly important during Stalin's reign, and then after Stalin died, he ended up somehow making his way up the rank ladder to being the premier of the Soviet Union. And that was usually the way all of the Soviet premiers after Stalin ended up rising to power. And so I would most likely suspect that it will be an unnamed, unknown person that would end up taking the mantle of leading Russia. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Oh, what?
It might be Navalny.
Navalny? Nah, I don't think so.
Navalny is a character that got a little bit of support there for a while, but to me, he comes across as being slightly weak. I don't think he has it to carry it on through.
Yeah, I don't think he would. And also, he's too weak for Russia. You know, he's got a democratic mindset where the democracy is supposed to actually exist. In Russia, that's considered weakness. That wouldn't last too long because everyone would deride it and hate it. They hated it under Gorbachev. Gorbachev gave them free speech for the first time in Russian history. And now everyone in Russia hates that guy because he gave them free speech. It's like, what do you people want? Y'all are always complaining, we want freedom. And then someone gave him freedom, and then they went, freedom? Well, who needs freedom? We need a totalitarian dictatorship, Leah. It's like, y'all people just don't know what the hell y'all want. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, a big shout out to Rust and Rot, who put in a 50 and got us up to $7,443 on the fundraiser. So big thanks to you, Rust and Rot, for that. And moving on to our next question, we have one from Chase Maddie, who says, what if the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps did something similar to the armed insurrection soon?
Well, if they did, they would probably end up being successful. Problem is, we haven't seen them make much more progress than what they made around Shebekino, and we haven't even heard anything since then on that. They just kind of stopped and haven't been doing anything since. I think if they did that, though, they would be met with success, but I don't think they're actually going to be the ones to do it. They seem to have kind of fizzled out already. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Airsoft and War Footage, who says, will Wagner carry on the coup if Prigozhin is dead?
It seems, I would say yes. I was about to say it seems as though they're not. I actually didn't hear the part where he was dead. If he died at this point and was killed, I think he would be considered a martyr by the Russian public, and I think that the coup would begin again immediately. Someone would take up the reins and lead it, whether it was multiple people or a single person, and the Russians would have a lot more on their hands than just the Wagner revolting. It would probably be the Russian army revolting, the public, the citizenry, and everyone else, because he would look like he died for a cause at that point, and then people would really be emboldened by that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Sam Crunkleton, who says, any chance that the international community via the IAEA will pay off the troops around the reactors to disarm it and walk away?
There's a chance, but it's not particularly a massive chance, because you would have to be able to communicate individually with those soldiers and then give them that offer each, and that would be relying on them keeping that secret with each other until the final moment. So the chances of that happening would be slim to none, but it's still a pretty cool idea, and it would be pretty neat if that was able to happen. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this question goes to Roger H., who says, do you think the real reason that Russia destroyed the dam was to dry up the reservoir so the meltdown wouldn't allow radiated water to flow into the Black Sea and would destroy Ukraine only?
That's possible. However, the the Novokakhovka reservoir, while emptied, the Dnipro River still does flow through it. It's just about this width, like you're seeing right here. It's that width, and it just snakes its way past the power plant here on the northern bank of the reservoir, and then down towards the Novokakhovka Dam, and then it flows right out on into the Black Sea. So while the reservoir isn't as large as it was, if the reactor was to melt down, if all 4 reactors were to melt down like they're saying, and the radioactive fallout was to start flowing north, it would land in that river, and it would be as radioactive if it was the entire reservoir, or if it was just a small river that is snaking its way through there right now. The effects would largely be the same. They may have just blown up the dam just to cause as much damage as possible outside of the nuclear reactors. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Russ Rizzo, who says, did Congress vote on automatic invocation of Article 5 if Zaporizhzhia power plant is blown up?
I don't think the Congress has voted on that, and I don't think they can vote on something like that preemptively. I think they would have to allow for the normal governmental process to operate at that point. They couldn't just allow something to automatically happen. And so with that, I hope that does address that, at least from my understanding of the government, but I'm going to actually allow Matthew to answer that real quick, because I think he would know a little bit more on that topic than I would.
About the Article 5 being triggered if they blew up the power plant?
Yeah, about Congress voting on it just automatically happening if something else was to happen.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not very informed on that topic. I would assume, I'll be honest with you, does Congress even have a role in that?
I don't think they would. I think that's something that
No, I don't think they do.
I think that's something that will largely fall to the president's, the executive office, and then Congress may have a little bit to say in it. But then again, They've never really had a say in anything we've been involved in lately, war-wise, like Iraq or Afghanistan. That was largely just left to the executive entirely, and the Congress was only really able to try and create an issue over military spending and funding. But with that,
I think the way it might work is the president would have to go and vote with NATO on Article 5, and then Congress would have to approve a declaration of war, because that's basically what that would mean.
maybe. That may be the way it would unfold here in America. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night.
And the final question of the night goes to Plexus Gaming, who says, with the likelihood of the threat to the nuke plant, I would assume that NATO is on high alert. And do you have any information?
Unfortunately, we have no information about NATO's response to that information. It appears right now there has been no response from NATO at this point, even on an official level or a ceremonial level. We haven't seen anything coming out of NATO at this point, and so sadly we haven't seen that. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching. There are 8,000 of y'all still watching right now, and I'm highly honored that all of y'all have joined us tonight to follow this news. Luckily, while we've been running this stream, while there was information from the Ukrainian intelligence circles that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will most likely be undergoing a meltdown here in the next 14 hours at this point, we have not seen that occur yet. Fortunately, we will still be on a somewhat state of high alert on this channel, looking for news if that is to happen, but I hope that y'all have enjoyed the news nonetheless tonight, and I gotta thank you all so much once again for helping to raise $7,543 for Razom for Ukraine. Oh, I was going away from Matthew the E-Haw there, but it was... There we go, we got it. That was an amazing amount raised, and it will be helping to save multiple lives, well, dozens, if not hundreds of lives inside of Ukraine through that nonprofit, through the medical aid, and everything else that they provide. I've got to thank you all so much once again for joining us tonight. If y'all did enjoy the stream, please make sure to subscribe. It makes us really happy when folks subscribe, because it lets us know that y'all enjoy our work, and also... it keeps y'all apprised of when we run these streams. We run these streams usually 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That schedule never changes. However, if something does happen tomorrow with the nuclear power plant, we will be running a live stream tomorrow, and we'll just have a uninterrupted 7-day-a-week broadcasting schedule starting tomorrow, if that happens. But for now, count on us not being live tomorrow. We will, of course, be putting out a video tomorrow, like we do every single day of the week. It may be a Ukraine war summary, or it may be talking about a particular subject on the war, or it may be just talking about the news in general. But we run those videos every single day of the week as well. And so not only does your subscription make us really happy and let us know that y'all enjoy what we do, it also keeps y'all apprised and notifies y'all of whenever we put out these streams or the videos, which come out almost every day like clockwork. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Thank you all once again. Good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. Thank you all for another successful fundraiser, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Slava Ukraine.
The Lee Spring Army sends its